Comprehensive Martial Arts. Madam, please take it seriously. Introduction. Flying snow shooting white deer in the sky, laughing book, divine hero leaning on blue mandarin, crossing through Jin Yong's martial arts. Everyone wants to be a great hero, respected by others, righteous to the sky, but I have become a Cao thief. Gongchang sighed and looked at the panel that appeared in front of him. This month's golden finger has been refreshed. Eye of Bliss. The owner of the Eye of Bliss holds the essence of pleasure, and any opposite sex who looks at the Eye of Bliss for more than 5 seconds will be forced into a state of ultimate pleasure. The duration will be determined per second based on mental intensity. For each successful duration of 1 second, it will permanently increase the viewer's favorability by a little, with a maximum limit of 90. Damn it, I'm a pure love party, okay? Chapter 1. The Eye of Cao Thief. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, where am I? The head was hurting so much that Wu Gong opened his eyes and began to slowly examine the surrounding environment. I saw the white gauze around me moving without wind, and on the distant table, there was a white candle alone, with a faint scent of incense in the air. Is this a homestay? Ah. Wu Gong tried to sit up from the bed with his arms propped up, but found that there was pain all over his body, especially in his right leg, which was swollen and unbearable. Even a slight movement felt like a sharp knife piercing through it, and the intense pain made him fall back into the bed. However, soon he couldn't care so much anymore. Because he found that his body had become shorter. Yes, there's no mistake. His body has become shorter, or rather smaller. Originally, he was 1.8 meters tall, but now he looks at most 1.4.5 meters tall. And his figure has also become very thin, his belly has disappeared, it feels like he's back to the age of 11 or 12. The sound of footsteps coming from afar. The door was pushed open, and a graceful woman in a blue long shirt walked in from outside. Through the white veil, it was impossible to see her face clearly, but her figure was excellent, carrying a heroic aura as she walked. Don't move. You have snake venom in your body. Although you have used your internal energy to detoxify, you still need to quietly recuperate, otherwise the remaining poison will still attack your heart. Although the tone was full of plainness, the crisp voice still exuded a hint of mature woman's steadiness and virtuous demeanor. However, Wu Gong had no intention of thinking about this at this moment. His brain was running rapidly, and reason told him that if it weren't for filming, he might not be on Earth anymore. Internal power. Where is this? This is Jiaxing Lujiazwang. Lujiazwang. When Wu Gong was a bit confused, the white veil had already been lifted, and the elegant fragrance of flowers accompanied it as it rushed into the big bed. The woman's face had also been imprinted in his eyes. The hibiscus is not as beautiful as a beauty's makeup, the water palace breeze brings the fragrance of pearls and emerald green. Wu Gong looked a bit stunned. Although this woman may not be considered a sunken fish and fallen geese, with a closed moon and shy flowers, she possesses a unique beauty of chivalry and heroism. However, there was a hint of sadness hanging around her eyes, as if there was something difficult to solve in her heart, which added a touch of charm to her. Alas, poor child. I originally wanted to keep you in the village until you recovered, but now the village is about to become chaotic, so I really can't keep you, otherwise I will inevitably implicate you. Child. Chaos. Before Wu Gong could finish speaking, a white light curtain appeared before his eyes. Golden finger refreshed this month. Eye of Bliss. The owner of the Eye of Bliss holds the essence of pleasure, and any opposite sex who looks at the Eye of Bliss for more than 5 seconds will be forced into a state of ultimate pleasure. The duration will be determined per second based on mental intensity. For each successful duration of 1 second, it will permanently increase the viewer's favorability by a little, with a maximum limit of 90, refresh time countdown. 31.23.59.30, the permanent retention task for the Eye of Bliss has been added. If it is not completed, the Eye of Bliss will disappear after the refresh is completed, and there is a high probability that it will never be refreshed again. The Eye of Bliss permanent preservation task. Protect Lujiazwang from being blood-washed. What is it? Wu Gong had not yet awakened from the confusion of whether he had already traveled, and at this moment, he was once again lost in confusion. He couldn't figure out what was happening to him, and his eyes unconsciously met the woman in front of him. Lu Enyang looked at the middle-aged boy in front of her, who was at most over 10 years old, and recalled the scene of rescuing him on the roadside not long ago. This child is indeed pitiful. It looks like it was thrown off the carriage, with many broken bones all over. He was completely naked and even bitten by a passing venomous snake on his leg. If the servant had saved him in time, he might have died by the roadside long ago. Although Lu Enyang has been practicing martial arts for many years, she is still a woman's family. Moreover, her daughter is as big as Wu Gong's body at this moment. Under the deep influence of licking the calf, a feeling beyond sympathy emerged, especially when looking into those eyes. Looking into those eyes, Lu Enyang's face suddenly turned red, and an inexplicable strange feeling began to spread over her. The Lu family and his wife are both martial arts practitioners who practice the technique of purifying the mind and reducing desires, so they rarely engage in sexual activity. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been only one daughter, Lu Wushuang, for so many years. But now, she has developed an indescribable feeling. What's going on here? Lu Enyang's eyes were a bit hazy, and blood rushed all over her head. The bottleneck she had been reaching for many years had a faint sense of looseness. However, at this moment, she couldn't care so much anymore. Because under the blue robe, a strange smell spreads in the air. Lu Enyang couldn't help but let out a low growl. Ah! Wu Gong, who finally reacted from the shock, immediately noticed the abnormality of the woman beside him. Thinking that his eyes were no longer ordinary, he quickly moved them away. As his eyes moved away, Lu Enyang also seemed to have been drained of most of her strength and fell to the bedside. Lu Enyang kept panting heavily. In a moment, the sorrow that had troubled her for many days was completely forgotten. Is it because of the excessive worries these days that I have gone crazy? Lu Enyang didn't notice at all that the boy lying in bed had a faint pink color deep in his eyes. She felt the soaked clothes and her face turned even redder. She turned around and ran towards the door. Wu Gongchang sat up with his body propped up. He looked at the wet footprints on the ground. Understand that you are not dreaming. Am I traveling? Lujiazwang, Jiaxing Lujiazwang, inner power. This can't be Jin Yong's martial arts, can it? Wu Gong widened his eyes. Blood fingerprints of Lujiazwang, Li Macho slaughtering Lujiazwang with blood, Wu Santong and Wu Sanyang, Gua Jing and Huang Rong retrieving Yanggua, Ouyang Feng accepting his adopted son. Countless words linger in my mind. Have you really traveled through time? Cousin, is that right here? I'm not going in. The girl's silver bell-like laughter came from outside the door, and Wu Gong turned his gaze away. Two little girls are peeking inside the door, exploring their minds. They look only 8 or 9 years old at most, but they are very handsome. Among them, the little girl on the right and the woman just now have an 8 to 9 similarity between their eyebrows and eyes, indicating a blood relationship and a much more lively personality. The little girl on the left, although equally handsome, is clearly much more composed. Although the two girls are of the same age, there is a huge gap between them in their stillness and movement. Wu Gong's heart twitched and suddenly said, "Who is there?" Seeing being discovered, Lu Wushuang dragged Qingying into the room and said, "You're really strange. You've been working hard all day, and you're still sleeping in the room. You're such a lazy person, cousin. Do you think so?" Qingying looked at Wu Gong, who was struggling to sit on the bed, and whispered, "Are you feeling uncomfortable?" Wu Gong shook his head and did not want to entangle him too much in this matter, nor did he dare to look into the eyes of the two girls. Although he doesn't consider himself a good person, he still can't do any mischievous things to 2 8 or 9-year-old girls. Lu Wushuang shrugged his nose, sniffing the smell in the air. She smelled the strange smell and immediately bent down curiously, saying, "Cousin." Seeing her so impolite, Cheng Ying tugged at her, but Lu Wushuang was curious and ignored Cheng Ying's tug. "Are you Cheng Ying? Do you know me?" Cheng Ying was a bit curious. When she saw Wu Gong being carried back by the servant yesterday, she was still in a coma and shouldn't have known her. "Her name is Lu Wushuang, isn't it?" Wu Gong turned his gaze to the girl who looked like a skin monkey. Upon hearing Wu Gong call his name, Lu Wushuang lifted his head from the bedside and said, "How do you know my name? Did your mother tell you that?" "Yes." "Has something strange happened to Zhuangzi recently?" "Strange thing?" Cheng Ying pondered for a moment and said, "There is indeed a strange thing. Yesterday, 9 blood palm prints suddenly appeared on the walls of the lobby at some point. And there was also a strange person who dug into the graves of his uncle and aunt." Cheng Ying spoke in a particularly organized manner, recounting 7 or 8 strange events that occurred in the Zhuangzi. Mature and steady, it doesn't seem like an 8 or 9-year-old child at all. However, although he talked about many things, only the first 2 were truly useful. "I actually traveled to the world of Jin Yong's martial arts." "Schwanger, Inger." The voice of Lu Ernyang came from outside the door, and Lu Wushuang quickly grabbed Cheng Ying, grabbed her hand, and ran towards the outside. "Mother called us, come and see you tomorrow." What else does Cheng Ying want to ask? But could only be pulled away. Opening the blanket covering himself, Wu Gong looked at his short but swollen thighs, which were like carrots. Wu Gong immediately understood that he was now a useless person and basically said goodbye to walking. "What kind of thing is this? It's better to give a more reliable golden finger after crossing time, just give this kind of golden finger. Do you expect me to stare at the enemy and make him fall in love when facing him? If a woman is okay, what if she is a man? Can I still go?" Wu Gong cursed a few words in a low voice, but he also knew that complaining was simply futile. He could only let out a long sigh and take a closer look. "However, although I don't know why I traveled to this world, to some extent, it seems like it's also pretty good." Wu Gong is a naturally optimistic person, and he quickly accepted the idea of his travels. However, compared to this matter, he is more concerned about another matter. That is the blood handprint that has already appeared in Lujiazwang, which means that the red training fairy Li Macho is about to come to the slaughterhouse. Wu Gong vividly remembers that Li Macho, in order to fulfill his 10-year promise, printed a blood handprint 3 days in advance. Cheng Ying said that blood fingerprints only appeared yesterday, which means today is safe, and Li Macho will only appear tomorrow. This made Wu Gong breathe a sigh of relief. "I am almost like a disabled person now, I can't even run away if I want to. Tomorrow, no matter what, we must find a way to leave this Lujiazwang. Although I am very grateful for their life-saving kindness, the great kindness is not to be thanked. If the future develops, it's not too late to help them seek revenge. It's getting dark soon." The food sent by the servants in Lujiazwang. Wu Gong hastily took a bite and felt tired. He was ready to go to bed and run away tomorrow. But who would have thought that a man's voice could come from above? "Throw it up." This voice is incredibly powerful. But what Wu Gong was more concerned about was that there was actually a person on his roof, and he was so stunned that he didn't hear a sound. Looking out the window, a shadow drifted high into the air from the window opening. Next, there is the second one. A younger man's voice came from below again, "What are you doing?" Subsequently, the man also jumped onto the roof from the ground. But his footsteps were heavy, and compared to the silent footsteps before, his footsteps were as piercing as thunder. He lingered on the roof for a long time, walking from east to west, from west to north, as if searching for something, but never found it. At this moment, another woman's voice came from below. Mr. Lu doesn't need to chase after me anymore. My husband is also well-intentioned. What kind of kindness? The man on the rooftop jumped down from the roof, his words filled with questioning. Good intentions are taking my daughter away from me. Lu Enyang took the lead and said, Husband, look for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Master Wu is afraid that the demon will harm Shuang'er and Inger. He must have hidden them in a safe place. After a moment of silence, the man said, If that's the case, this is the only way. However, immediately after landing, the second mother said, Wu Sanyang, I have forgotten that there is a little brother who was saved in the village a few days ago. The demon is ruthless and ruthless. This little brother is not my Lu family, so there is no need to be implicated by our Lu family. My husband and I discussed and originally planned to send him away tomorrow, but now that the demon is approaching, it is too late. That demon wants the lives of our Lu family. You are not the Lu family, so our couple would like you to take care of this little brother. The person below seems to be pondering what to do. Suddenly, a gentle song drifted in the distance, saying, What is love in the world? Teach life and death to be together. With each word sung, the person came much closer. The third line of the song had not stopped and had already arrived outside the door. Wu Gong also heard this song, and he felt a cold sweat rising from his head. Red Practice Fairy. Li Macho arrived early. Cold sweat emanated from the head of Wu Palace. A thought suddenly appeared in my heart. That is to say, the world may not operate exactly as depicted in the novel. If one follows the novel completely in their actions. So it's very likely that there will be no place to bury oneself. This is a real world, not a game that can be explored. The opportunity to choose, like his previous life, will still only come once. Chapter 2. A Pretty Wife. Taoist. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lu Enyang held her husband's hand. The two have been married for over a decade and often have conflicts in their daily household chores. But now facing the fleeting enemy, remembering the infamous name of this Red Practice Fairy, my heart cannot help but be filled with fear and worry, and my palms have become even tighter. I don't know why, feeling the warmth emanating from her husband's palm, the boy lying in bed appeared in Lu Enyang's heart and mind. At the same time, the most worried thing in my mind was actually that boy. My daughter, who was usually regarded as the apple of my eye, was actually forgotten. I thought to myself that if the situation was urgent, I would rush upstairs and take Wu Palace away first. She didn't realize at all that she and this child were just a one-sided relationship and shouldn't have developed such emotions. Wu Gong tore the blanket into strips of cloth and forcefully tied them to his legs. The intense pain made his face pale, but he still tied his legs into a mummy. Attempted to stand on the ground. Although there is still some instability in standing. But at least it won't be too weak to stand still. Wu Gong is well aware of the reputation of this Red Practice Fairy. This guy has no moral values. Because she hated He Yuanjun, she slaughtered all 30.6 merchant ships on the Yuanjiang River. And because she hated He Yuanjun, she slaughtered all over 50 fists of a boxer surnamed He. Even the baby in swaddling clothes was not let go. This woman hates the Lu family so much. I will definitely be easily killed in the Lu family. It's better to stay away from the Lu family. Even though I am a traveler, my body is a teenager with no foundation in martial arts. Faced with top-notch martial arts experts like Li Macho, he has no resistance ability. So applying oil to the soles of the feet is the best choice. Biting his teeth, he walked step by step towards the door. As I walked out the door, I happened to see the door downstairs turning into a sky full of sawdust amidst the roar. Two servants rushed towards the door, but before they arrived, the silver dust swept over them, causing their brains to burst and their bodies to fly into the air until they collided with the walls on both sides before stopping. The beautiful nun, dressed in an apricot yellow Taoist robe, walked in from outside. Wugong stared at the Taoist nun for a moment, with a charming expression, bright eyes and white teeth, and a fair and greasy skin. Despite her beauty, she wore a apricot yellow Taoist costume, which was truly a pity. However, at this moment, he had no intention of appreciating beauty. Quickly run towards the bottom of the stairs, ready to take advantage of the current chaos and escape from here. Biting his teeth, he had just reached the first floor and had not yet stood firm when a human figure fell from mid-air. Wugong was caught off guard and was directly knocked out. Under intense pain, he pushed away the figure that had hit him. But suddenly it was discovered that this was a headless female corpse. Judging from the clothes and attire on her body, she should be a servant or servant. Watching such a terrifying corpse up close, Wugong was frightened to the point of losing his soul. Looking into the yard again. 4 people have already stood in a group. They are Lu Eryi and Lu Ernyang from Lujiazwang, as well as Wu San Nyang, the wife of Wu San Tong. But it's more likely Macho, dressed in an apricot yellow Taoist robe, playing alone when he says he's deceiving others with more. Facing the swords, spears, and swords, Li Macho only lightly waved the brush dust before sweeping away all 3 weapons. She didn't want to kill the 3 immediately, just because she was ultimately a seed of infatuation. Seeing Lu Liding, the current owner of the Lu family village, with the shadow of her lover in the past, she thought to herself that if she raised her hand and killed him, the Jiangnan Lu family's swordsmanship would never be seen again, and her lover would be completely cut off. She couldn't help but hesitate in her heart. This has always been just fighting and frolicking, without setting up any killing moves. The 3 of them fought from underground all the way to the roof. Li Macho unilaterally suppressed and hit 3 people. Unexpectedly, she suddenly waved the dust and knocked the 3 of them away, then quickly rushed down the roof and rushed towards the outside of the yard. Immediately after, the sound of the clanging of refined iron came from outside the house. It was obvious that other people had arrived outside, attracting Li Macho's attention. When should we wait instead of running at this moment? Wugong was not familiar with this Lujiazwang, so he gritted his teeth and decided to leave through the broken main door. But at this moment, a slender palm squeezed his neck. Wugong looked behind him and immediately met the eyes of Lu Ernyang. The latter's face turned red again. Wugong quickly averted his gaze. This Eye of Bliss is really too domineering. As long as one looks at each other, it can generate extreme pleasure and forever increase the liking of the viewer. The only weakness is that one must stare at each other for 5 seconds and can only be useful to the opposite sex. No eye contact. Lu Ernyang's originally rapid breathing also subsided. She saw that her husband had already rushed out, hesitated for a moment, and said to Wu Sanyang next to her, "Sister Wu, I'll entrust you with this child." After speaking, she placed Wugong on the ground to one side. At the same time, he turned around and rushed out of the yard. Wugong stood reluctantly against the courtyard wall, looking at the only woman who had not rushed out of the yard. Wu Sanyang, the wife of Wu Santong, is a woman who combines wisdom and courage. She only looked like she was in her 30s, wearing a brown and gray strong suit. Although she was not tall, due to years of martial arts practice, she did not feel the bloated feeling of a middle-aged woman at all, especially with a long sword in her hand, adding a touch of heroism. Looking at Wugong in front of her, Wu Sanyang frowned. Just a few glances at each other, but my body began to involuntarily heat up, and I felt a panic in my heart. Could it be that I had already been poisoned by the red practice fairy Li Macho in the just battle? You should know that this demon has long been possessed by a poisonous spell. There have been rumors in the martial arts world that she can poison high-ranking officials who have lived in temples for a long time from thousands of miles away. Wu Sanyang reached out and felt a frenzy on her body, trying to block the flow of qi and blood, but found that the feeling of dryness and heat was still getting heavier and was spreading uncontrollably. Sure enough, she was poisoned, and Wu Sanyang took out a medicine bottle from her arms and ate it up with her head up. Wu Gong also withdrew his gaze and looked at the ground. Feeling the heartbeat slowly calming down, Wu Sanyang finally breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Wu Gong in front of her again, remained slightly silent, and suddenly tore open her clothes and wrapped them in long strips. Without giving Wu Gong any chance to react, he tied him to his back and charged towards the door with his sword. Outside the courtyard gate, Li Macho still faced 3 enemies with 1. However, Wu Sanyang's position was changed to a blind person leaning on a cane. Although the blind man's eyes turned white, his pair of iron crutches danced like tigers and tigers. He is none other than the flying bat Kuzhenxie, the leader of the 7 monsters in Jiangnan. Wu Sanyang hesitated for a moment and immediately joined the battle. Facing the encirclement of the 4 people, Li Macho remained like petals floating in the air, easily avoiding all attacks. The dust in his hands waved, making the 4 of them airtight and unable to breathe. Wu Gong's face was as heavy as water, and he never dreamed that he would be forcibly tied up to join this battle. Fortunately, the 4 of them complemented each other well, and for a while, Li Macho had no choice but to deal with them. However, the Lu couple's kung fu bullying of ordinary people is still acceptable, and it is simply not on the table. In fact, only Wu Sanyang and Kuzhenxie can faintly compete with Li Macho. Wu Sanyang is in her prime, so even if she carries Wu Gong behind her back, she can still catch and fight for a long time. However, Kuzhenxie is still old, and although the demon subduing staff technique is equally powerful and heavy, her faint breathing becomes incredibly heavy, obviously unable to hold on for too long. Watching the defeat unfold, Wu Gong knew he couldn't hold back any longer, otherwise his life would be in danger. Wu Gong worked hard to open his eyes wide, while shouting, "What a beautiful Taoist nun, sinking fish and falling geese, closing the moon and blushing flowers. It's a pity to wear this apricot blossom Taoist robe. She looks good, how could she leave home?" Upon hearing these words, Li Macho immediately saw Wu Gong behind Wu Sanyang's back. He looked at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and looked into each other's eyes. An indescribable sensation began to spread throughout his body. One mistake caught him off guard and he swung his crutch, hitting her heavily on the arm and flying her backwards. However, while still in the air, Li Macho had already regained his balance, and between his slight steps, he had already landed steadily on the ground. She shook her head vigorously, and couldn't help but blush on her face. Even though she was infatuated and entangled with the former head of Lujiazwang, Lu Zhanyuan, to the point of discussing marriage, she still maintained her virginity. Therefore, facing this strange feeling that appeared on her, she not only felt a strange comfort, but also a deep panic in her heart. People tend to panic when facing their unknown things. This is a very normal thing. What's wrong with me? Is it because I've been in a state of extreme weather and have shown signs of becoming possessed by a madness? Kuzhenxie succeeded in one blow and immediately burst into laughter. This little brother continued to shout, disrupting her inner thoughts and watching me clean up the people today. Although Kuzhenxie cannot see, his ears are extremely sensitive. He heard Li Macho's suddenly accelerating heartbeat and believed that Wu Gong's words had disrupted her inner thoughts. But Wu Gong has already cursed this old blind man to the heavens in his heart. Can you speak less nonsense? Aren't you directing fire towards me? When Wu Gong looked at Li Macho again, he indeed saw that the other person's eyes were already filled with a cold killing intent. However, this precisely aligns with the original intention of Wu Gong. The crimson color once again covered Li Macho's cheeks. Chapter 3. Struggle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, up. There is not too much nonsense, just a concise and clear word. Kuzhenxie was the first to charge forward. Although he was blind, the accuracy of his cane was not biased at all, especially after using the inscription technique, the cane pierced Li Macho's forehead like a long spear. Li Macho lifted his hand and swept the dust around the tip of his cane, forcing Kujanxia back once again. However, she was also carried back by a tremendous force. Although there were constant strange sensations coming from my body. But after all, she is the top existence in the martial arts world, with her internal strength like a majestic sea. Even though her body is weak, it is not something that Lu Enyang and a few others can balance. However, Li Macho was also secretly surprised in his heart. This old man is Kujanxia, the leader of the 7 monsters in Jiangnan. The famous Jing in the martial arts world is his disciple. Look at him with both eyes blind, legs still disabled, old age, intermittent breathing, but still possessing such strength. It seems that Jiangnan is truly a land of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Li Macho suddenly let out a moan. Under her gaze, she unintentionally met Wu Gong's eyes again. However, although I don't understand why such a strange thing happened to me. But Li Macho knew he couldn't drag on any longer, and he wanted to avenge everything he said today. A fierce force surged in my heart as I watched the crutch, which was so strong, hit me in the head. Li Macho's face showed an angry expression, and the dust on her hand lifted again. Her body seemed to have turned into a water snake, extremely soft, complemented by the faint blush on her face, which was indescribable in all kinds of charm. Kuzhani did not expect her to suddenly exert force, and there was no time to recover her strength. With a soft start, she collapsed towards the bottom. Li Macho narrowed his eyes and brushed the dust towards the back of his head. However, at that moment, a sharp sound of breaking through the air came from behind. It turned out that Wu Sanyang, holding a long sword at some point, had already arrived behind him, and it seemed that there was not even a 2-foot distance left. "Old blind man, you're lucky." Li Macho snorted coldly with a blush on his face, waving the dust brush towards Wu Sanyang. Her waist and limbs were as soft as bones, twisted, and she immediately walked up to Wu Sanyang's back. Wu Sanyang was taken aback and quickly waved her luck, patting her forehead. Li Macho's waist swayed lightly again, like a lotus blooming from the water, trembling slightly in the wind. He easily dodged and used his palm as a knife to chop towards Wu Sanyang's back. Wu Gong's face was pale, he was lying behind Wu Sanyang. If this is hit with one palm, Wu Sanyang may be fine, but she will be ruined. He doesn't have much martial arts skills. Li Macho felt ruthless in his heart, although he didn't want to have any grudges with Master Eating. But this woman is really too annoying, let her have a long memory. But as he watched this knife about to strike Wu Sanyang, he suddenly saw Wu Gong's pale face and his heart trembled. An indescribable emotion filled his heart, and he trembled for a moment. No, absolutely not to hurt him. She surprisingly forcefully withdrew her palm and just waved the dust brush, hitting Wu Sanyang's right leg. Although Wu Sanyang, who was also sweeping, was torn apart, there was clearly no concern for her life. It was just that Wu Sanyang flew out with Wu Gong on her back, revealing Lu Enyang behind her. Lu Enyang faced Li Macho with a fierce force alone, and her fingers trembled and her legs became weak. Just when the situation came to an end, there was no second way out, so I could only grit my teeth and wield my sword to stab Li Macho's throat. Lu Lighting's eyes turned red as he saw his wife about to suffer. He reached out and threw the sharp knife at Li Macho. Then, spread out your hands and arms, trying to embrace her and die together. Li Macho dodged the flying single sword on his side, and a hint of disgust flashed in his heart as he saw Lu Lighting actually want to come and hug him. She slapped Lu Enyang's lower abdomen and flew her horizontally. At the same time, turning around, the brush in his hand was swung out with a swoop, sweeping over Lu Lighting's celestial cover. In an instant, both the Lu couple were seriously injured. Of course, Lu Lighting is even more serious. After all, his head had already been dented by the blow. Lu Enyang, on the other hand, was lighter, but she also vomited blood and turned pale. Li Macho is truly a top-notch expert in the martial arts world. It only took him a moment to seriously injure the two of them. By the time Kujinxie and Wu Sanyang rushed to their rescue, it was already too late. She seemed to have full confidence in her own methods and didn't even want to repair the knife. Instead, she retreated towards the distance and said, "I have no relationship with Peach Blossom Island or master eating. There's no need for the two of you to continue fighting with me. The martial arts world is full of grievances. Now, there are only the last two left." As she spoke, she turned around and rushed into Lujiazwang. However, as she rushed into Lujiazwang, she kept tilting her head and watching, as if afraid that Kujinxie and Wu Sanyang would launch another surprise attack. But only she knew that her gaze was entirely fixed on Wu Gong. Strange, why do I think about this little beast? Guy. Li Macho rushed into Lujiazwang. Not long after, a big fire ignited. She actually set fire to Zhuangzi directly. Kujinxie and Wu Sanyang saw her so violent that they even set fire to Zhuangzi, which made their eyes crack with anger. The two of them, one in front and the other behind, charged into the village with iron rods and steel swords. Unexpectedly, he bumped into Li Macho, who had rushed out of the village, and looked at the two people rushing towards him, one in front and one behind. With an unpleasant expression on their faces, they said, "Where are those two girls?" No one answered her question, and Kujinxie's powerful and heavy cane smashed into the air, emitting a sharp explosion. But Wu Sanyang, like a butterfly, rushed towards Li Macho from the side with the roar of the exploding air. Li Macho narrowed his eyes and dodged the iron staff on his side. The dust blew out, with a hardness comparable to that of steel bars. He quickly wrapped the long sword in Wu Sanyang's hand. An endless stream of power swept out from the dust. Wu Sanyang felt a pain in her tiger's mouth, and her long sword was easily broken into several pieces by the dust. The remaining hilt also flew towards the distance under immense force. Wu Sanyang's long sword was destroyed, and her face immediately showed a frightened expression. But she didn't have enough time to be surprised. Because the shattered long sword had now transformed into a sharp hidden weapon, rolling towards her and Kujinxie. She hastily lowered her head, wanting to dodge. But suddenly he remembered that he was carrying Wu Gong behind him, and could only change his moves halfway, spinning rapidly in the air like a big top, avoiding the flying shattered swords and arrows. But she still has injuries on her legs. Compared to when the movements are intact, they are noticeably slower. Therefore, even though he dodged cleverly, these shattered swords and arrows still cut through her clothes. While revealing a large expanse of snow-white skin, he also cut off the tightly bound silk strip that bound Wu Gong's body. Wu Gong felt that the sky was spinning and the earth was spinning, and his body was like a bow and arrow flying towards the sky. He instinctively waved his arms in an attempt to struggle. But this power is really too great, it can only fly higher and higher. And after passing the peak that the force could reach, it quickly fell towards the ground. Like a rootless and boundless straw, it can only drift with the wind and is uncontrollable. Be careful. Ah! Kujinxie heard the sound of the blade cutting through the air, and the iron staff flew rapidly into the air, shooting down all the steel fragments. But then he heard Wu Sanyang's exclamation of surprise. Suddenly, he was puzzled, could something that he couldn't see happen again? The next second, he heard something falling from the sky. The speed is not fast, but the volume is not small, and the sound of the wind sounds like a person. Is it the female demon head? At this point in his mind, Kujinxie quickly wielded his cane and smashed it towards the place where the object was descending. In addition, his left hand kept holding 3 poisonous thorns. My original intention was to take the opportunity to sneak an attack on this female demon head. But when I thought about hearing that the Ice Soul Silver Needle of this red practice fairy was extremely poisonous, I couldn't see anything in my own eyes. When the silver needle flew, its sound was very low. If I had thrown these 3 poisonous thorns, not only would it not have hurt the female demon's head, but it would also have allowed her to use the famous Ice Soul Silver Needle. Isn't that even harder to resist? So, even though the situation was urgent just now, the hidden weapon in hand never dared to be thrown out. Now, such a great opportunity, if not used again. So there may not be a chance below. At this thought, he no longer hesitated, and the poisonous thistle in his hand immediately shot towards the direction where Wugong was, like a piercing bullet. During the descent, Wugong only saw 3 black shadows shooting towards him. But there was no resistance at all. Bold! The black shadow leapt up from the ground and passed directly over Wu Sanyang. The dust in his hand crossed the air and quickly wrapped around Wugong's body, not only pulling him away from the range of the 3 poisonous thorns, but also pulling him away from the area covered by the iron staff and towards his direction. This black shadow is none other than Li Macho. Watching this scene, although she didn't understand why she wanted to save Wugong, Wu Sanyang wouldn't easily let this female demon lead pull Wugong away. Wu Sanyang, because she had no weapons in her hand, actually reached out to pull the dust. At the same time, Kujinxie also knew that he had done something bad. However, he also heard Li Macho's position clearly based on his voice. The crutch in his hand rose off the ground, chasing the stars and the moon like a shooting star, quickly thrusting towards Li Macho's head. If hit this time, a brain burst is the best outcome. Li Macho's heart was filled with disgust, so he quickly took back the dust and retreated towards the back, thinking to himself, this blind old man is really shameless. It's okay to bully him more, but he still uses such despicable means to force me to save people. I have to show him some color, otherwise he really thinks I'm afraid of him. How does he know that I will definitely go to save people? Li Macho suddenly felt a doubt in her heart, but her hand movements were not delayed at all. The waist sways quickly like a lotus flower, and the steamed rolls, bread, look like silver threads of the brush curls around the head of the staff. Kujini felt a strong force trying to snatch his iron staff out of his hand, and quickly regained his fortune. Unexpectedly, the internal strength had just reached the top of the cane when the opponent's strength suddenly disappeared. It was originally a struggle between the 2 sides, but unexpectedly, the other side withdrew their strength. Kujinxie was caught off guard and immediately lost his balance. All the strength was thrusting into the air, and the ears kept shaking, trying to find the other person's trace. But I didn't expect that Li Macho had appeared behind him like a ghost, and his palm was placed on his chest. He smiled and said, Mr. Ku, my red flame divine palm has already reached your chest. Why is your reaction so slow? It seems that when people get old and don't like it, they can't do it. Do you think so, Mr. Ku? Kujinxie knew that he had no way to resist now. If that palm were firmly slapped, I would definitely end up in a life and death situation. However, he never feared anyone in his life and immediately said angrily, Demon bitch, if you have the ability, just kill me. If I frown, it's not from my parents. If you dare not kill me, then stop talking nonsense. Wu Sanyang just caught Wugong and was about to put him on the ground. Upon seeing this scene, he immediately rushed towards Wugong, ready to rescue Kujinxie. Li Macho smiled lightly and jumped up, leaping horizontally from the iron staff and flying towards the sky. However, as she passed by Wu Sanyang, she suddenly bent down and reached out to touch her face. At the same time, Li Macho had seductive eyes, staring at Wugong in her arms. After seeing that Wugong was not a big deal, he chuckled lightly and said, although I don't want to provoke master eating, I really hate people who meddle in things. Let you remember for a long time. As she spoke, she smiled and leaped rapidly between the treetops, leaving towards the distance. Wu Sanyang felt incredibly warm on her face, and being touched by Li Macho made her feel incredibly comfortable. Watching Li Macho's back quickly slide through the dark willow bushes and disappear, the heart that she had been holding in her heart finally came down. I just felt my legs weak and quickly sat on the ground, unable to stand up for half a day. She gently placed Wugong in her arms on the ground, quickly tapped herself a few times, and then used her luck to heal the wound. Ku Zhenyi also felt a big stone pressing down on his heart, feeling extremely uncomfortable. He quickly adjusted his luck and took a long time to recover before recovering. After a while, Wu Sanyang stood up from the ground. But black smoke had already risen, and Lu Jiazhuang was completely enveloped in flames. The dazzling fire, like a blazing snake, approached towards this side. She discussed with Ku Zhenxie and immediately helped up the Lu couple on the side. But both of them were seriously injured, especially Lu Liding, whose skull was shattered and seemed to be on the brink of death. Even if it was Hua Tuo's reincarnation, there was no possibility of rescue. On the other hand, Lu Ernyang, although equally seriously injured, is clearly better off. After Wu Sanyang took out a few pills and fed them to her, her face finally stopped turning pale. Their injuries are all very serious. If we just move them like this, it might worsen their injuries. Ku Zhenxie also nodded, but there was no healing potion in his hand. At this point, it would be great if Huang Rome were here. She has many hidden elixirs in Peach Blossom Island in her hands. Although Lu Liding may not be able to save them, Lu Ernyang can definitely save them. When the two were in a dilemma, a man suddenly came from a distance and shouted rudely, "Madam, are you okay?" This person is none other than Wu Santong, the husband of Wu Sanyang. Wu Gong looked at the crazy and tower-like figure of the strong man, vigorously shaking his own dizzy head. This strong man is really too strong. When he ran over from a distance, he was a bear with straight legs. And his hair was particularly vigorous all over his body, but he wore a blue bib around his neck that looked like a baby's. It doesn't look like a normal person. Turn your head again. Wu Gong suddenly saw Lu Ernyang lying on the ground in the distance, looking at her pale face. A smile was squeezed out with difficulty. Lu Ernyang's originally pale face suddenly turned red. Wu Gong quickly shifted his gaze away. This woman is obviously bleeding too much, I can't harm her anymore. Don't die in the hands of Li Macho, but rather in the eyes of your own bandits. Although Wu Gong shifted his gaze away. But Lu Ernyang had no intention of looking away. After spending this period of time together, the Eye of Bliss had already pulled her liking for Wu Gong to an unimaginable extent. Just now. When Wu Gong flies into the sky, Lu Ernyang struggled to save him, but fell to the ground due to excessive injuries. It wasn't until Wu Sanyang caught Wu Gong that she no longer struggled to lie on the ground. For her husband around her, although she is also concerned, the gap between the two cannot be compared. At this moment, Wu Sanyang was at a loss when she suddenly heard her husband's call and her heart suddenly relaxed. I thought to myself that you have been crazy for so many years, and finally you are a reliable person. But seeing the clothes that were still intact not long ago, now they have become torn and tattered again, and the scarf that Yuanjun used on his neck is still intact, she couldn't help but feel resentment for the first time in her heart. For so many years, she has turned a blind eye to her husband's love for his adopted daughter that goes beyond family affection, but now she has developed a kind of resentment. "Madam, are you okay?" Wu Santong asked with his eyes wide open. Wu Sanyang let out a deep sigh and said, "I'm fine, I'm here." Wu Santong rushed forward and saw that Wu Sanyang was not in any serious condition. He then glanced at the Lu couple on the ground, and his internal strength quickly enveloped them. He bent down and picked them up, saying, "Come with me, it's not advisable to stay here for a long time." Wu Sanyang nodded, ready to hold Wu Gong in her arms and follow Ku Zhenxie towards the distance. Wu Gong suddenly reached out his hand to stop and said, "The big fire that's happening here, the soldiers of the official family will arrive soon. You are not waiting here for the protection of the soldiers of the official family, but you have to flee without permission. The Lu family and his wife are seriously injured, and moving back and forth will only lead to a dead end. I don't know where you are going, waiting for the soldiers of the government to come and rescue is the most important thing right now. Lu Jiazhuang is also a famous village in the Jiaxing area. Why did he flee alone? Wu Gong's words were well-founded and immediately made Wu Sanyang's hands stop in the air. She quickly lost her mind, and now that she wants to come to Wu Palace, she is indeed right. Lujiazwang is not a bandit's den. When the officers and soldiers come, they will only provide assistance, not take advantage of the fire to rob. Although those officers and soldiers may not be able to help much, with a large number of people, that female demon may also be able to be a bit wary. Ku Zhenxie also nodded. Before coming, he had already sent someone back to notify Huang Rong and Guo Jing. A big fire has started here again, and they estimate it won't be long before they can find it. When they arrived, even if the female demon didn't leave, and even if she had excellent martial arts skills, it was not a concern. But Wu Santong had no intention of listening to Wu Gong's words. He turned around and left, holding the Lu couple in his arms. Wu Sanyang was about to stop, but she could only let out a long sigh. Gently carrying Wu Gong behind him and chasing after Ku Zhenxie. Wu Zantong turns eastward and westward, heading for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com for several miles. After running for a long time, he led the two of them to a dilapidated kiln. This is a pottery kiln of an abandoned liquor kiln, with a large space of several hundred square meters. Wu Sanyang walked into the cave and saw her two sons, Duanru and Xiuwen, safe and sound. She then let go and let out a sigh, placing Wu Palace on the ground. The Wu brothers are sitting on the ground with Chengying and Lu Wushuang, two cousins, playing with stones. Chengying and Lu Wushuang saw the Lu couple, but after only a moment of absence, they became so miserable. Immediately pounced on the two, crying and shouting. Ku Zhenyi heard Lu Wushuang cry and shout for his parents. Suddenly, Li Macho remembered asking, "Where are the two girls?" Before setting fire to Zhuangzi, I was immediately shocked and said, "Oh no, it's not good. We might attract ghosts to come. This female demon head has been looking for these two children all along just now, maybe she's already following up." Wu Gong rolled his eyes and seriously doubted whether this old blind man was old and confused. "I just said it for a while, that's what I mean. Wu Sanyang is mature, experienced, and exceptionally intelligent. She had just thought of this. However, Wu Santong has excellent martial arts skills, although he often goes crazy. But once he gets serious, even the one lamp master needs to use 7 or 8 parts of his energy to subdue him. So when he saw the arrival of Wu Santong, he was not very afraid anymore. After listening to Ku Zhenxie's words, Wu Santong slammed the nearby pottery kiln with force, causing the solid kiln to be covered in spider web-like cracks. He shouted, "The red refining female ghost is lingering, and I will meet her for a while today." He stood up outside the cave. Chapter 4. Dog Skin Ointment equals Red Refining Fairy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Li Macho sat on a big tree to exercise his energy and regulate his breath. She was really hit by Ku Zhenyi's iron staff, even though her strength was strong, the demon wand technique had just reached Yang, but it still caused her a considerable internal injury. Now I have been using my internal energy to recuperate for a while before suppressing the injury, but my body is still injured quite a bit. She sat at the top of the tree, her nose twitching gently. Carry royal jelly with you. This kind of honey was brought down from Mount Zhongnan by her, with an extremely light aroma. Even those with deep internal strength can only smell it as ordinary floral fragrance. But the jade bee she carried with her could be found with extreme precision. Even if it is dozens of miles away, it can still be found. In the just confrontation, she smeared royal jelly onto Wu Sanyang's body. Therefore, I am not afraid to lose them at all now. After completing the breathing adjustment, I slowly opened my eyes. Li Macho did not rush to catch up. But starting to recall what happened before. What happened before was beyond her imagination. Especially the feeling that arose on her body, which made her feel extremely panicked, but also made her unable to forget and intoxicated. Although Li Macho has no intention of killing, he knows nothing about the relationship between men and women, and this is even more true for men and women. She once thought she was inexplicably poisoned by something. If it weren't for the internal mental skills of the ancient tomb sect, they would have the ability to detect whether they are poisoned. She really thought she was unknowingly poisoned by something sinister. The fact proves that she was overthinking. There was no such thing happening. But this made her even more puzzled. Is it really the internal force flipping caused by the sudden attack of qi during this period? A young man's face suddenly appeared in Li Macho's mind. This young man's face was particularly blurry at the beginning. Lu Lang. Subconsciously, she mistook the young man in her mind for Lu Zhanyuan whom she had met under the apricot tree that year. Just like countless times when my soul is haunted by dreams. But then she saw the face clearly that is a completely unfamiliar face to her. It's the face of a teenager. Li Macho knew this face, but she didn't know when it had actually entered her heart. Wu Santong, like an owl, squatted at the entrance of the pottery kiln, constantly patrolling left and right. Inside the pottery kiln, a tragic farewell ceremony is underway. Lu Liding's skull has completely shattered, in a sense. He was able to live thanks to the internal strength that Wu Santong gave him, which gave him a breath. If it weren't for him holding back this breath, he would have died long ago. However, the fundamental reason why he did not swallow his breath was because he still had one thing to do, and if he didn't do it, he would not close his eyes. He struggled to turn his head and said to Chengying, "Ying, come over here. I have a handkerchief on my chest, take it out." Chengying wiped away her tears and obediently walked over, reaching into Lu Liding's clothes and taking out a handkerchief from his chest. The handkerchief is made of high-quality silk and white satin, with a red flower embroidered on each corner. This flower is red and dazzling, with an emerald green leaf lining each flower. It can be seen that the person embroidering this handkerchief is very skilled. This high-quality silk white satin, although due to its age, has some slight yellowing. But the flowers and leaves above are still lifelike, as if they were real flowers. Lu Liding said, "Ying, tie this handkerchief around your neck and don't take it off." Chengying didn't understand his intention, but as her uncle instructed, she just nodded silently. Lu Ernyang had been holding onto the palm of the landing unparalleled all along. When she heard her husband's voice, she raised her eyebrows and said, "Are you really so heartless? Schwanger is your daughter, why don't you give Schwanger? I thought that at the most critical moment, you would care about your own flesh and blood. I didn't expect that at the last moment you still thought of others. You are just like your damn brother." At this point, Lu Ernyang's eyes were already filled with murderous intent. She had long been filled with resentment towards such an unwarranted disaster, and now even more so, seeing her husband even thinking about finding a way to survive for someone else's daughter before he died, she immediately exploded like a powder keg, completely detonating it. Lu Liding's mind was a bit unclear now, but he still stuttered and said, "I can't let down his mother's trust." Lu Ernyang sneered and said, "Did he disappoint his mother's trust?" "That's right, anyway Schwanger is a girl, and the seedling in Lujiazwang has been cut off to this day. It doesn't matter to you anymore, you just want to keep a good reputation hee. Lu Wushuang didn't know what his parents were arguing about, but he just cried out, "Dad, Mom." Lu Liding said softly, "Madam, why don't you hurt Schwanger and let her follow us?" Originally, this red flower and green leaf brocade handkerchief was a token of love bestowed upon Lu Zhanyuan by Li Macho in the past. Before his death, Lu Zhanyuan had told his younger brother that as long as he took out this red flower and green leaf brocade handkerchief and begged for mercy, it was impossible for this female demon head to let the Lu family survive. It's just that Lu Liding is arrogant and has never done that. Until now, when the mountains and rivers were exhausted, he finally pulled out this red flower and green leaf brocade handkerchief. Chengying is the daughter of brother Lu Liding. Her mother entrusted her daughter to be raised by Lu Liding before her death. He was entrusted with a heavy responsibility, and at this critical moment, he gave her this life-saving silk handkerchief. But in the eyes of Lu Enyang, this was a blatant betrayal, and she even regretted the hard work she had put in over the years. She couldn't imagine what kind of father he was, able to give up his biological daughter, and was completely disappointed with this man in her heart. Come with you, do your spring and autumn dreams. Starting from today, let's cut ties with the Lu family. Go find your damn beast brother. From today on, Shuang'er's surname will no longer be Lu, you can go and die. Lu Enyang's original surname was Yi, and she changed her surname only after marrying into the Lu family. Now, since Lu Liding no longer wants a daughter, so, she doesn't need to follow the surname of the Lu family anymore. Wu Sanyang frowned upon hearing this. She was born into a prestigious family and had a different education, which made her not very fond of Lu Enyang's words at this moment. However, she didn't have much intention of meddling in other people's household affairs. At this moment, both of them are seriously injured, and excessive emotional fluctuations can also affect their injuries. After listening for a while, both before and after knowing a rough idea. After hesitating for a moment, Wu Sanyang said, how about I divide this handkerchief into 2 pieces and give each of the 2 little girls a piece? Isn't that okay? Lu Liding wanted to say more later, but suddenly he couldn't catch his breath and the corners of his mouth were bleeding uncontrollably. He could only nod his head, indicating his agreement. Wu Sanyang tore the silk handkerchief in half and handed it to the 2 little girls, tying them firmly around their necks. Wu Gong sat in the corner with difficulty. His body was already seriously ill and after such a long period of turmoil, it became even weaker. Especially his legs, they seemed to have become even more swollen. But there was no pain left. Taking a glance under the dim light, he was already severely purple and scared. He quickly untied the ropes that bound his legs, but still didn't feel anything. I don't know, I just arrived in this world and I'm going to lose a leg. Wu Sanyang noticed the commotion here and immediately walked over. She was also taken aback when she saw the purple and swollen thighs. She quickly reached out and grabbed Wu Gong's calf, waving her palm upwards without noticing any other movements. Wu Gong's pants were completely shattered into countless pieces of cloth, scattered all over the ground. Wu Gong's blush. Just as he tried to drag the rags and preserve his dignity, he was suddenly rushed into his mind by the piercing pain. Wu Sanyang's fingers twitched wildly. The warm airflow kept sinking into Wu Gong's thighs with her fingertips, and Wu Gong finally successfully felt the presence of his thighs again. Just where the warm airflow lay, the pain of countless cuts spread all over his body, and his forehead was covered in dense cold sweat. Don't tie it with a rope anymore. Your meridians are blocked and your blood flow is not smooth. Fortunately, you discovered it early. If you were a step later, your leg would be useless. Wu Sanyang wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked into Wu Gong's eyes. Her body trembled immediately. I don't think you're young, I didn't expect you're still young. Wu Sanyang suddenly closed her mouth and took out a pill bottle from her arms. She took out an emerald green pill and said, take this and it won't hurt in a while. What's wrong with me? How did I say such a thing? Wu Sanyang thought of how she had just flirted with a teenager, and she didn't dare to go see Wu Palace. Thank you very much. Wu Gong also extended his palms, trembling, with his eyes fixed on Wu Sanyang's face. Suddenly, Wu Gong reached out and pointed at her face, saying, "What's wrong with your face?" I saw Wu Sanyang's left cheek pitch black, like the bottom of a rusty pot. Wu Sanyang saw Wu Gong pointing her finger at her face. Immediately puzzled, he reached out and touched his face, saying, "What?" This touch revealed that there was no sense of touch on my left cheek. In my heart, I was startled and remembered how Li Macho had touched my face before passing away. Could this soft and fragrant palm lightly caress me, and it turned out to have poisoned me? Thinking back, she said she wanted to have a long memory, which should be the right thing to do. In a flash of thought, Wu Sanyang sat cross-legged and reached out to constantly tap her body, beginning to detoxify. Wu Santong turned around and saw his wife's face pitch black, which made him pale with shock. However, just as he was about to speak up and inquire, a silver bell-like laughter came from outside the cave. "I've been hiding here, looking for the book garden www.zhaosuiyuan.com. I said I searched around but couldn't find it. Hurry up and throw out all 4 of their family. Otherwise, I'll set fire and stew all of you until you're done." Although the voice was particularly pleasant, the words were full of malice. Wu Santong rushed out of the cave, and Li Macho was already standing gracefully dozens of meters away. I couldn't help but be surprised and said, "Why haven't we seen this woman for over a decade, yet she is still as beautiful as before." At first, the former owner of Lujiazwang, Lu Zhanyuan, kidnapped his adopted daughter. In a fit of anger, he chased after her from Dali to Jiangnan and happened to meet Li Macho, who came together to find fault. At that time, Li Macho was around 20 years old, and by this time he was already 30 years old. But at this moment, the Taoist nun in front of her is still as delicate as she was at the beginning of her life, except for changing her dress. She gently brushed the dust in her hand, her expression very leisurely. Her watery big eyes were full of autumn waves, and her peach cheeks were dizzy. If it weren't for the fact that the entire martial arts world knew, Li Macho, the Red Lotus Fairy, although carrying a fairy name, was actually a ruthless female demon who killed without blinking an eye. Otherwise, I will definitely be confused by her appearance at this moment, thinking that she is a kind and wealthy woman with hair and cultivation. Wu Santong shook his head and suddenly saw the dust in Li Macho's hand. He suddenly remembered that his weapon was still in the cave. At this moment, if we turn around and return to the cave, this female demon head will definitely rush in together. At that time, something big will happen. Looking left and right, Wu Santong saw a chestnut tree with a bowl mouth thickness next to the cave. Immediately, both palms pushed towards the chestnut tree, and with a loud shout, the chestnut tree was directly inferred from it. Chapter 5. Witches are difficult to handle, stand up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, good strength. Li Macho chuckled lightly, but his eyes were filled with seriousness. Wu Santong was a former commander of the Dali Imperial Guard and a proud disciple of Master Eating. One young finger is also a famous martial arts skill in the martial arts world, which is the ultimate victory. 10 years ago, Wu Santong far surpassed him. 10 years later, even though her martial arts have become extraordinary, she still has to be cautious. Moreover, she has no grudges with the Dali-eating master, so there is no need to dwell on this grudge. Wu Santong flipped the tree trunk horizontally and held it in his hand as a weapon. "Miss Li, haven't seen you for 10 years, are you still okay?" Wu Santong has outdated ideas and doesn't like to change. 10 years ago, he called Li Macho Miss Li. Today, 10 years later, although she has put on a Taoist robe, she is still called Miss Li. Li Macho smiled brightly upon hearing this. No one had ever called her this name in the past decade, and now she suddenly heard it. Unable to help but feel dazed, the naive girl who had just walked out of the martial arts world immediately appeared in her eyes, and all the warmth of the past also surged into her heart. But soon she remembered that she could have been with her crush for a lifetime, but to her surprise, there was another He Yuanjun in this world, which made her feel ashamed and lonely. At this moment, the tenderness and sweetness that emerged in my heart disappeared without a trace, leaving only resentment. However, she did not vent her anger on Wu Santong. On that day, Wu Santong accompanied her and caused a big banquet, which could be considered as sharing the same illness. But Wu Santong on the other side didn't think much about it. On that day, Li Macho killed over 100 people, mostly just because of sadness and to vent his hatred. This is something he cannot imagine, and his fear of this woman is increasing in his heart. After a moment of silence, Li Macho said, since I have printed 9 fingerprints on the wall of the Lu family, I must kill these 2 girls. Wu Sanyi, 10 years ago I was called Wu Sanyi, but today I still call you Sanyi. Please make way for me, and when I avenge you, I will detoxify your wife. In the future, seeing you again in the martial arts world will give you some respect. Wu Santong shook his head and said, the enemy is already dead, why bother killing them all? Besides, his brothers and sister-in-law are both seriously injured and dying. You also burned the Lu family village to ashes, just 2 small girls. Please spare me. Li Macho continued to shake his head, his tone still gentle and gentle. Master Wu, please make way. If I don't allow it, what should I do? Wu Santong silently grabbed onto the trunk. Li Macho's face completely changed and he said, then we'll have to offend. She struck quickly and fiercely, even though she had a smile on her face the previous second, her eyes were already filled with murderous intent the next second. The dust quickly swept through the air, brushing towards Wu Santong's head. Compared to tree trunks, dust appears insignificant in size, but the power carried by those silver threads is not something that ordinary people can bear. Although Wu Santong is a disciple of Master Yideng, he can only hastily evade. Wu Gong lay on the ventilation opening of the cave and looked out, but he had no martial arts skills on him. Therefore, watching the interaction between the two is like watching a phantom, and it is impossible to capture the detailed movements of the two. But he could tell from the faces of the 2 people that Wu Santong was gradually losing strength and falling into a disadvantage. Seeing this, Kujinxia also rushed out. Wu Sanyang did not rush out, she wanted to protect the elderly, weak, women, and children in the cave. However, even with the addition of Kujinxia, Li Macho is still in his prime and has a deep internal strength. Wu Santong and Kujinxia teamed up and surprisingly ended up in a draw. The idea of escaping once again appeared in Wu Gong's heart. But he is now disabled and has nowhere to go if he wants to go. Before hesitating, Wu Sanyang's voice came from behind. What are you doing? Looking back. Lu Ernyang actually struggled to stand up from the ground. Turns out, after just treating her injury, she has successfully suppressed it. Although I can't use my internal strength yet, I'm just like an ordinary person. Those surnamed Lu will stay here and wait for death. Those surnamed Yi won't stay, let's go, Schwanger. Lu Ernyang, no, she should be called Yi Ernyang now. She grabbed her daughter's hand and looked, not at her dying husband on the ground, but instead at Wu Gong standing on the side. Come with me. Wu Gong looked at her hesitantly, but as soon as he thought that the 2 people outside couldn't hold on for too long, Li Macho would rush in sooner or later. He nodded and said, okay. The 2 of them exchanged glances, and Yi Ernyang's body immediately trembled. Holding Lu Wushuang's palm also suddenly increased her strength. Lu Wushuang, who was still sobbing, suddenly froze. His red eyes looked up, but because the cave was dim, he couldn't see anything, only smelled a faint smell. This smell is particularly familiar. It's the same smell I smelled in Wu Gong's room before. Wu Sanyang wanted to speak up and stop Yi Ernyang, but there was no good reason. Besides, her 2 sons were also here, and her husband was fighting outside, so he could only remain silent. Lu Liding watched as his wife was about to take her daughter away, leaving Chengying alone. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but his heart was filled with excitement and anger, his head tilted, and in the end, he couldn't hold his breath and died in unwillingness. Lu Wushuang was originally pulled up by his mother, feeling a bit confused. Suddenly, he saw his father no longer breathing and once again broke free from his mother, kneeling down on his father and crying bitterly. Yi Ernyang looked at her husband's corpse without looking at her, and the strange look on her body suddenly stopped. Although she had made up her mind to cut ties with the Lu family, she still couldn't help feeling sad. One day, the couple had 100 days of kindness. After all, they had been sleeping together for so many years. Just as Yi Enyang was about to squat down, she suddenly realized that her clothes were already wet, and couldn't help but be taken aback. Detected that Lu Liding has died, the decision to permanently retain the task of the Eye of Bliss has failed. It will disappear after the refresh time ends. I can only say that there will be authors outside the timeline. P.S. Jojo. Suddenly, a sharp bird cry came from outside the cave, followed by Kujinxia's laughter. Ha ha ha, Fuer, you're here. Hurry up and ask Jiaoer to peck at her. Is there a change? Wu Gong's heart twitched and he looked out again. I saw two white shadows rushing down in the air outside the cave, with rapid speed, like two lightning bolts passing through the air. They are two large eagles, each half a meter long, with wings spread out like two pieces of white silk. They charge from both sides, one left and one right, attacking Li Macho on both sides. Behind them, the 11 or 12-year-old girl was constantly waving and commanding. Li Macho saw the twin eagles shooting down from the air, and immediately made a somersault, flipping over the chestnut tree with a golden hook hanging upside down. His left foot caught the trunk, and he could not shake it off even as Wu Santong swayed left and right, as if it had been glued to a piece of candy, making it particularly difficult to entangle. The eagle failed to hit and flapped its wings as it flew towards the sky. The girl quickly blew her whistle and further directed the eagle to kill Li Macho. Li Macho's heart sank. This flat-haired beast was not a concern, and could be killed with just a flip of her hand. However, she had heard that Jing and Huang Rong from Peach Blossom Island had a pair of large eagles who were knowledgeable in human nature and skilled in joint attacks. Kujinxia is Jing's master. Now the carving is also here, isn't it true that Huang Rong and Jing are all here? Wu Gong saw the eagle and then the pink and tender girl, and immediately let go of her hanging heart. Guofu has arrived, can Jing and Huang Rong still be far away? No, we can't drag it on any longer. Li Macho's eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he waved the dust to protect his head and face. With his long sleeves, he swung out 3 icy silver needles, which shot out one after another. 2 split shots of the double eagle, one pointing towards Wu Santong's chest. Xuanjiao's eyes were sharp, and he quickly flapped his wings and flew high, but Li Macho's silver needle was thrown at an extremely fast speed, like lightning and lightning. The sound of breaking through the sky made a hissing sound, brushing past the edge of the eagle's claws and leaving a deep and shallow scar. This injury is not a problem, but the scars only turn green and black in an instant, and it seems that the body is already poisoned. The 2 eagles were frightened and dared not stay any longer. They turned around and flew towards the depths of the forest. Despite Guofu's cries, they still refused to fly back. Wu Santong was looking up at each other, but suddenly saw a flash of silver light. He quickly rolled away, but the silver needle still pierced his left calf. Wu Santong rolled up and stood up, but to his surprise, his left leg immediately ignored him. He felt like he was no longer his own, and he exerted his strength to stand up from the ground. Unexpectedly, this exercise not only failed to disperse toxins, but also accelerated the movement of toxins in the body, causing numbness to spread to the legs and then spread to the upper body. In the blink of an eye, Wu Santong lay motionless underground. Guofu shouted, Jiaoer, come quickly. But the white-winged twin eagles fled far and didn't even want to pay attention to it, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Li Macho sneered and said to Kujinxia, this is Jing's daughter, isn't it? Mr. Ku, you said that if I go down with this icy silver needle, can she still live? How dare you? Kujinxia roared, but he blocked Guofu's face and blocked her with his body. I dare not. Li Macho looked at the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com and thought to himself, dreams last long at night. Don't wait for Mr. and Mrs. Jing to arrive, it will be troublesome. Under his feet, he forcefully lifted himself into the air and flew straight into the cave, ignoring Kujinxia and Wu Santong lying on the ground. Wu Sanyang quickly jumped up and stopped, waving her sword and shouting, "Don't come in." Li Macho smiled and said, "Your husband still has some help, why don't you go and save him?" Wu Sanyang looked at Wu Santong lying on the ground with hesitation in her eyes, but for some reason, she was more worried about Wu Gong in the cave dwelling. Just as she hesitated, Li Macho moved, like Jin Royo Dragon. In the blink of an eye, he was already behind Wu Sanyang. Even though he quickly waved his palm and patted her back, he was still one step late. Li Macho's palm had already patted her back, then grabbed her clothes and threw her into the rock. In a dull voice, Wu Sanyang flew in. In the absence of Li Macho, she couldn't hold on for even 2 rounds, dong. Crashing against the hard wall, Wu Sanyang spat out blood and was on the brink of death, but Li Macho let out a faint sigh. She looked at the dense blood marks on her palm and said, "You're actually wearing inner armor." Originally, Wu Sanyang was actually wearing inner armor. Otherwise, after being hit by her red practice divine palm, how could she just spit out blood and be on the brink of death? However, as Wu Sanyang lost her ability to fight back, Li Macho did not continue to beat the water dog in pain. Glancing around, she immediately saw Yi Ernyang and sneered, "How lucky." She was about to rush forward, but to her surprise, a small figure blocked her in front and said, "Stop." Wu Gong gritted his teeth and stood in front of Li Macho. Chapter 6. Misconduct of Blind Men Without Completing the Mouthful Canon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Wu Gong is not a saint. Although Yi Ernyang looks like a celestial being, he still feels that his little life is important. However, just in the previous second, a white light curtain flashed before Wu Gong's eyes. When will love and revenge be avenged? The bright moon lingers together. Saving the Yi family mother and daughter, successfully blocking Li Macho from killing the Yi family mother and daughter, you will receive a designated refresh quota of X1. If the mission fails, there is a high probability that you will die from the accidental injury of Li Macho's Ice Soul Silver Needle, and you will experience a 10-hour survival without a chance, unable to survive watching Li Macho about to poison Ye's mother and daughter, and his own life in a daze on the brink of danger. Wu Gong could only grit his teeth and rush out. Stop it. Li Macho stopped with a smile on his face. Her bright red palms were as if covered in bloodstains. Why, can't you stop me? As she spoke, she looked into Wu Gong's eyes and said, "These eyes are so beautiful." Although Li Macho had met these eyes many times before, this was the first time he was so focused on them. For a moment, there was an impulse to take possession of these eyes. Feeling the heat flowing up and down on himself, Li Macho's smile not only became brighter, but also more gentle. "Young master, hurry up and move away, otherwise I will offend you." Even with the blessing of the Eye of Bliss, Wu Gong still felt the chilly chill spreading throughout his body. It is obvious that their goodwill does not allow Li Macho to let go of his hatred. Moreover, the Eye of Bliss also has an upper limit, which is that the favorability will only reach 90. Wu Gong didn't know what the concept of reaching a 90 degree of favorability was, nor did he know if the upper limit was actually 100. He gritted his head and said, "They are all dead, why do you still hold on to them? Just because he deceived you, you will end up lonely." "Shut up." Li Macho's face suddenly changed. Even though the strange feeling on her body continued, she still looked at Wu Gong with a cold expression in her eyes. "Young master, you're lucky that you didn't mention their names, otherwise I would have to kill you today. It's better not to say more, get out of the way, or I'll have to take action." Wu Gong suddenly calmed down. He looked at the woman in front of him. Li Macho was deceived when she was not yet deeply immersed in the world, which led to her excessive use of emotions, reaching the level of so-called madness, becoming extreme and irritable. To some extent, although she has killed countless people and her hands are stained with blood, she is also a poor woman. Wu Gong thought of this and decided to take another gamble, saying, "You said I'm lucky, but in fact, you're afraid yourself. Your so-called luck means that I didn't mention their names, but now I want to tell you that both Lu Zhanyuan and He Yuanjun have died, which is an undeniable fact. Li Macho's face turned completely icy cold, with dozens of long needles shimmering with silver light between his fingers. The Eye of Bliss finally worked, otherwise, the Ice Soul silver needle had already penetrated Wu Gong's entire body. Yi Ernyang's face turned pale as she grabbed Wu Gong's arm, as long as she protected him behind her. But he found that the half-grown boy in front of him waved his hand and knocked it open. That body, which was only half her height, was like a high wall, protecting her and her daughter from behind. Wu Gong continued to say to Li Macho, I know your notorious name, Red Practice Fairy, such a big name. Many families surnamed He in the martial arts world were brutally exterminated overnight, and because the name of He Yuanjun had a Yuan character in the middle. So, as you passed by the Yuanjiang River, in a fit of anger, you slaughtered dozens of merchant ships and civilian fishing boats on the river, creating the illustrious reputation of your red training witch. But it still cannot conceal that you are a cowardly and incompetent person. Lu Zhanyuan broke his trust with you and married He Yuanjun while we were secretly engaged for life. This is both inhumane and unjust. Such a heartless and unscrupulous man, yet you treat him as the best man in the world. In order to be with him for a lifetime, you can kill everyone in the world. And what I am certain of is that even now, you are still fantasizing in your heart about the lifelong daydream of being with him. You are truly a pitiful person. There are countless beings in the world, not just billions. Even if you have high vision and value emotions, is there no one in the world worth entrusting for life? Just a Lu Zhanyuan, he can abandon you. Why can't you abandon him? If he were alive, let alone you, I would have personally killed him. But he has already died, and He Yuanjun also committed suicide with him, at least sacrificing himself for love. He deceived you alone and covered your hands with blood. He went crazy for 10 years. After 10 years of being the leader of the Dali Military Bureau, Wu Santong, he committed suicide and died in love. His brother was killed by you, and dozens of people in Lujiazwang died in the fire. Countless innocent people in the pit died in your hands, leaving you burdened with a sea of blood and hatred. This kind of person is killed by everyone in the world, but you treat him as a treasure, even preparing to make yourself lonely for a lifetime for such a heartless and unjust guy, sinking into sorrow and suffering for the rest of your life, unable to transcend. You have taken a wrong path. I heard you have seen master eating before. It seems that despite spending so many years studying Buddhism, this one lamp master who became a monk for love still has his true nature unchanged. Surprisingly, it takes you 10 years to awaken yourself. This is simply foolishness and stupidity. No wonder you have taught such a foolish disciple as Wuzentong. Although Li Macho's eyes were still cold, his murderous aura had decreased significantly. Wu Gong knew that it was necessary to strike while the iron was hot and use stronger materials, otherwise it would not only be useless but also have the opposite effect. But at this moment, a figure rushed in from outside, waving its iron staff and heading straight towards Li Macho's head. Surprisingly, it was Kuzhani, an old blind man who thought he had found an excellent opportunity. Kuzhanxie was originally a villain. He never speaks of benevolence, righteousness, or morality, so it is quite normal for him to make such a sneak attack. But what Wu Gong saw was that his eyes were about to crack, and his pupils instinctively contracted. Li Macho seemed to have eyes growing behind his head. He forcefully rolled the dust in his hand backwards and then swung it forward, causing the iron rod to detach from Kuzhanxie's hand. Along with Kuzhanxie, he was pulled and flew straight ahead. However, it was obvious that Kuzhanxie did not just resort to such small means. The sky was covered by iron thistles, and even though Li Macho was as ghostly as a ghost, he was still hit by 3 or 4 iron thistles. The apricot yellow Taoist robe on his back was immediately stained red with crimson blood, looking exceptionally dazzling. Li Macho's killing intent flashed in his eyes, and the ice soul silver needle flipped its hand and chased after Kuzhanxie. Poo 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 poo. Kujinxia screamed and crashed into the wall, with long silver needles inserted into his back. All of this is just too fast, it's already over in the blink of an eye. Before Wugong could react, he saw Li Macho rushing towards him like lightning. Yi Ernyang drew her sword to defend herself, but at this moment she is no different from an ordinary person. Not only can I no longer use my internal strength, but even my sword-wielding hand is trembling uncontrollably due to the injury. Li Macho sneered in his heart, his palms instantly turning blood red. She wanted to slap this damn woman to see the king of hell, but for some reason, she suddenly remembered what Wugong had said earlier. People are already dead, is it necessary for me to keep remembering not to let go? Just for the heartless man Lu Zhanyuan. In a moment of confusion, Li Macho finally gave up the idea of killing her and only teased Yi Ernyang aside with the back of his hand. Then, grabbing the panicked Lu Wushuang and Wugong, he bent over and grabbed Qingying, who was silently crying next to Lu Dingli, and ran towards the outside of the cave. The strong smell of blood rushed into Wugong's nose, and Li Macho's back was completely stained red with blood. The blood hole visible to the naked eye revealed that she was already seriously injured at this moment. Upon seeing the person coming out of the cave, Wu Santong struggled again to stand up, but failed again. Li Macho didn't glance at him and passed over his head. However, Wugong saw it vividly. Next to Wu Santong, there is a small beggar with a ragged body. He wanted to help Wu Santong stand up from the ground, but with his strength, it was obvious that he couldn't lift a strong man like an iron tower from the ground. He exchanged a glance with Wugong, and then Wugong was grabbed by Li Macho and ran towards the dense forest. Li Macho was injured, even though she had deep internal strength, she still had some physical exhaustion. Especially the two girls constantly struggling and crying, which made her feel very annoyed. Even under Wugong's words, she actually had no killing intent towards the Lu family. However, the arrogant, domineering, cruel, and ruthless personality developed over the past decade cannot be changed in just 1 or 2 words. Watching the two girls getting more and more lively, Li Macho's eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he waved his palm to make them shut up. With her palm, even renowned teachers and disciples like Wu Santong may not be able to hold on, let alone 2 little girls. Stop it. Wugong immediately spoke out to stop and grabbed Li Macho's palm. It's just 2 girls. Wugong's movements can already be considered rapid, but some people's movements are faster than him. The sharp sound of breaking through the air came. 2 hidden weapons smashed into Li Macho's hands, one in front and one behind. Li Macho was greatly surprised and quickly jumped up, only to see clearly that they were actually 2 ordinary-looking small stones. At this moment, the sharp sound of breaking through the air came from behind again. It's another small stone. Li Macho took off the dust from his waist and swung the handle. The dust, like willow catkins, hit the stone just in time. With a burst of joy in his heart, he was ready to use the word wrapping technique to wrap the stones back together and throw them back. However, he suddenly felt a pain in his tiger's mouth, his palms heated up, and his whole body involuntarily trembled. He took several steps back before stopping. Just a small stone, it has such powerful power. Li Macho's heart was immediately filled with fear. She dared not stay any longer and reached out to catch Wugong and the 2 girls again. But only in time did they catch Lu Wushuang and Wugong, and the stones flew back again. Li Macho frowned and a silver needle flashed through his hand, enveloping the last Qingying. He no longer cared about her and grabbed the landing Wushuang and Wugong before turning around and fleeing. What a wicked woman! In a daze, a man in a blue robe drifted out of the forest. He picked up Qingying, who was already unconscious on the ground, and wanted to pursue Li Macho. But it was discovered that Qingying had already developed black scars on her body, indicating that she had been poisoned. Give a long sigh. Forget it, if you can save one, it's one. After speaking, he no longer pursued Li Macho, but left with Qingying in the opposite direction. What is the experience of kissing the crimson witch forcefully in Chapter 7? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, supporting the wall, Li Macho spat out a mouthful of black blood. Kujinshia's iron thistle was also coated with venom. After running for so long, the toxin had already begun to spread to other parts of the body, especially the internal organs. Tearing off his apricot-colored Taoist robe, Li Macho began to deal with the hidden weapon embedded on his back. Her face showed pain, but her cheeks were unknowingly flushed. Just because Wu Gong was sitting opposite her, with a pair of eyes fixed on him without straying. Look again, a while, gouge out your eyes. I'll have to watch even more, after all, there won't be much chance if I don't watch anymore. Li Macho didn't speak anymore, just his face turned even redder. One by one, she dug out the iron thistle from her own flesh. These iron thorns are all sharp spikes. Every time one is pulled out, it will bring down a large amount of flesh and blood, and dense beads of sweat will emerge from the forehead. 1, 2, 3 Li Macho couldn't pull out the fourth one anymore. She struggled to reach out to the wall, but could not touch the iron thorn. She was so anxious that she was sweating profusely, and under the pressure of her anger, another mouthful of black blood spurted out. She has royal jelly on her body, which can detoxify hundreds of toxins. But if you don't take out the iron thistle soaked in venom, drinking too much royal jelly will be of no use. Damn the old blind man. Li Macho has already held a deep grudge against the old blind man who attacked him in his heart. However, the old blind man probably won't survive after being hit by her ice soul silver needle. This revenge can be considered as revenge. When his mind was in chaos, Li Macho suddenly felt a pair of palms appear behind him. She instinctively waved her palm and was about to fight back, but was stopped by a voice. Don't move. Wu Gong grabbed her shoulder with one hand, while the other hand wrapped it in cloth and grabbed the iron thorn embedded in flesh and blood. Puff, black blood sprayed out from the wound like a fine arrow, but fortunately, the iron thistle was also successfully removed. Li Macho's luck sealed the wound. She was panting heavily while groping inside the torn Taoist robe beside her. Until he took out a small bottle and drank it all in one gulp. Wu Gong dealt heavily, tearing off a small piece of flesh and blood. Looking at the blood hole that looked like a 7-star bead, Wu Gong let out a sigh of regret and said, "Unfortunately, with such a beautiful back, I won't be able to pull out the cupping in the future." Put the iron thistle on the table. Wu Gong sat back across from Li Macho and continued to stare at her. Li Macho closed his eyes and practiced martial arts without moving, as if transforming into a puppet. So, Wu Gong looked at her and saw the dawn all the way. Lu Wushuang was bound with his hands and feet, blocked his mouth, blindfolded, and thrown into a nearby corner of the wall. She kept moaning and moaning, but as she continued to do so, she became tired and fell asleep, and even now she hasn't fully woken up. Or perhaps she had already woken up. However, she knew she had no way to escape, so she decided to save her energy and not move. Li Macho is really beautiful, not just beautiful. He needs to have a figure, height, and good manners in his speech. Is this Lu Zhanyuan, who was enchanted by various soups of Yuanjun, willing to give up such a fiancé? Aren't you running? Li Macho, who was practicing martial arts with his eyes closed, suddenly said this sentence. Although his tone was plain, there was no hint of coldness, but rather a faint attachment. How can I run? Wu Gong patted his still swollen thighs with a broken expression. Now I'm just like a useless person, and besides, I'm penniless. Where do you want me to go? If you dare to run, I will kill you. Okay, I'm waiting for you to come and kill. Wu Gong struggled to stand up, and the sky outside was already bright. He pushed the window open a crack, and the street outside was gradually filled with people. Their current location should be within the city of Jiaxing. Because last night when Li Macho was flipping through the city gate, he saw the words Jiaxing. Having martial arts skills is good. The city gate tower, which was several tens of meters high, flipped over with just a gentle leap. An ordinary person who wants to break through the city gate must climb up the steep stairs, which takes at least half a quarter of an hour. Wu Gong couldn't help but have a longing for martial arts. I finally came to this world of martial arts, and I can't be an ordinary person anymore. While pondering, a roar like the roar of a dragon came from the distant sky. Wu Gong was taken aback and was startled. The roar seemed to come from a faraway place, shaking the entire Jiaxing city to a complete awakening. Next to the inn was a small river, and a row of willow trees grew along the river. Even those willow branches shook and trembled in the roar. The roar followed one after another, and it grew louder and louder. The surrounding windows were pushed open, and drowsy people looked around and cursed, as if trying to find out who was not sleeping in the morning and insisted on shouting and shouting here. Not long after, another slightly sharper roar also spread over. If the previous roaring sound was like the roar of dragons and tigers, then at this moment, the two voices are intertwined with each other, but they have become the competition between the great ping bird and the sparrow. Although the sound of the great ping bird is deafening, the little sparrow is not inferior at all, intertwined and complementary, soaring above the 9 heavens and spreading thousands of miles away. Li Macho opened his eyes anxiously. It's Jing. Is this declaring war on me? Li Macho sneered and said, Jing, Daxia, is famous in the martial arts world. I want to see if he has real talent and learning. But soon she felt a chill in her heart again because she heard the sparrow's cry, and the two whistles echoed harmoniously, combining strength and softness. Just hearing this, she knew she was not a match for this couple, and at the same time, she thought of herself as alone, and that the couple was a well-known couple in the martial arts world, and couldn't help but feel sad and sad. It looks like they know you're in Jiaxing City. Wu Gong sensed the change in Li Macho's emotions and heard her murmur to himself. It was only then that he realized it was the long howl made by Jing and Huang Rong. However, Jiaxing City is so big that even if they want to find it for a while, it's impossible for them to find it. It's just a demonstration, I'm not their opponent, but they don't even want to keep me. Still look. Li Macho gave a white glance and still stared at Wu Gong. He reached out to grab the Taoist robe next to him, and then remembered that he had torn the robe to pieces in order to quickly retrieve the iron thorn. Now, it was clearly impossible for him to wear it again. But she wouldn't go out wearing a belly bag either. It seems that we can only go out and take action when it gets darker again. Wu Gong poured a bowl of cold tea and handed it to her side, saying, I'm hungry. Li Macho looked at the tea bowl handed to him and suddenly smiled, you have a big heart. You should also know my name. Although you haven't worn a crown yet, it's understandable that I killed you to protect my innocence. You should also know this, but it seems like nothing has happened. Wu Gongxin said, if you want to kill last night, you should kill it. Why wait until now? Moreover, he understood the power of the Eye of Bliss. With this ability, Wu Gong is temporarily very confident in the safety of his own life. Moreover, Li Macho's strength is evident to all, and even a direct encounter with one of Jing and Huang Rong is not a problem. Therefore, at this moment, Wu Gong should be said to be very safe. Do you want me to be afraid? Wu Gong suddenly leaned in front of Li Macho. I was indeed afraid last night, but now I realize that you don't seem to be that bad either. At least, in my opinion, you still have a chance to turn around. A faint fragrance seeps into my nostrils. In addition to the jasmine-like body fragrance, there is also a strong and extremely sweet taste at zhaozuiyuan.com. Li Macho has never experienced such a scene before for many years. Even though they were intimate with Lu Zhanyuan, they still treated each other with respect and did not have excessive skin-to-skin intimacy. She instinctively wanted to dodge, but when she met those eyes, her whole body couldn't help but feel hot and weak, with nowhere to hide. Wu Gong is not a half-grown boy physically, his soul is an adult, so he is facing this situation. Smelling the faint honey fragrance on Li Macho's body, I couldn't help but kiss him directly. Li Macho's eyes widened suddenly, but before he could react, Wu Gong had already pried open her teeth and rushed in. Sweet and fragrant, with an endless aftertaste. Her mouth was still filled with the sweet residue of royal jelly, which made Wu Gong, who had been hungry all night, suck even harder. The stomach beneath the rich and sweet royal jelly. After initial disbelief, Li Macho seemed to accept his fate without any resistance. She only felt her heart beating so fast, constantly rushing through the heat, and her pupils were already filled with spring. Wu Gong instinctively reached out and wiped away Li Macho's back, only to touch a wound that was oozing blood outward. He was startled and quickly withdrew his hand. And Li Macho also let out a low growl of pain, and then his lips parted. Look at the blood on your hands. Wu Gong licked his lips and swallowed the last bit of royal jelly from his lips. Li Macho looked at Wu Gong foolishly, his cheeks flushed, and he smiled sweetly. Now, are you still hungry? Wu Gong pondered for a moment before nodding solemnly, I'm still very hungry. Chapter 8. Jing and his wife. You are listening at Mouthful.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, this world is a bit complicated. Wu Gong found it hard to imagine that this world would be distorted to such an extent, because it actually existed in the four dynasties of Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing. Of course, they are just their respective countries. In fact, the complexity of this world far exceeds Wu Gong's imagination. After all, from the hand-drawn map he received, the area he had already delineated was already much larger than the Earth. According to Li Macho, there are other continents of similar size in the distant overseas. People of different skin colors often come to do business in mainland China, but of course, Li Macho doesn't know much about it. Because she spends most of her time killing people in the martial arts world, she doesn't care much about things that are not very important. Your dishes have all been served. Just let me know if you need anything. The waiter served all the dishes, but did not leave in a hurry. His eyes wandered around the room until no suspicious person was found before he left. Li Macho snorted coldly and crawled out from behind the door, holding Lu Wushuang in her hand. It's from the beggars' sect, but I forgot. Jing's wife Huang Rong is the current leader of the beggars' sect. She said, you seriously injured Kuzhinxia, that's Jing's master. It's strange that he doesn't lose his temper. Wu Gong helped Li Macho put away his chopsticks and said, come and eat. Without hesitation, Wu Gong picked up a piece of beef and said to Li Macho, who only drank and didn't eat, where are you going with me? Li Macho's face turned red as he was watched. The injury on your leg is very strange, I can't see through it, he said, isn't it just ordinary snake venom? No, when I give you true qi, this toxin is not just on your legs. In fact, it spreads all over your body, but now it only attacks on your legs. Over time, the symptoms will spread throughout your body. Wu Gong was stunned and looked at Li Macho with some disbelief. Seeing her face blushing, but full of seriousness, he understood that she had no need to deceive himself. Wu Gong lowered his head and pondered. After he came to this world, he did not acquire the memory of this body. Just through talking to Jin, I only learned that I was lying naked in the wilderness, with many broken bones on my body and traces of being bitten by snakes on my legs. Is there any other unknown secret about this body? Just as he was thinking about it, Li Macho suddenly grabbed Wu Gong's hand and said, don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you. Watching her affectionate expression, Wu Gong immediately understood that the kiss just now had completely replaced Lu Zhanyuan's position. But Wu Gong looked at his body again, and it seemed like he was only in his teens. Big cart, can't it be started? Li Macho suddenly turned around and looked outside the door. She withdrew her palm and stood in front of the table, brushing the dust. Your Excellency, since you have arrived, why be sneaky? Wu Gonggang just picked up a piece of beef and stuffed it into his mouth. When he heard her words and saw her movements, he was startled. The beef got stuck in his throat and almost choked to death. And almost as he spoke, the door exploded with a loud bang. A plain palm smashed through the door, crushing the air, and padded towards Li Macho. This palm looked very ordinary, but it occupied everything in Wu Gong's line of sight. In a daze, he seemed to see thousands of troops and horses rushing towards him, and the roaring of tigers and dragons echoed in his ears, causing his blood to coagulate and his mind to be confused, completely unsure of what to do. Li Macho also had a pale complexion. With a forceful swing of the palm, blood surrounded the fingers and slammed fiercely towards the other palm. Although the crimson palms looked imposing, they were still slightly inferior to the roaring of tigers and the roaring of dragons, as well as the countless armies and horses. Pop. Although not the main audience for this palm strike, the fierce impact of the air caused Wu Gong to fly out of the chair like a kite with a broken string. The table in front of him exploded directly, transforming into wooden spikes that pierced Wu Gong's body like bullets. His clothes shattered and became pieces of cloth floating in the air. Wu Gong slammed heavily on the wall, and the red blood spurted out from his mouth like a long arrow. He felt that all his bones were broken, especially his back, and the burning pain was as if he had been sprinkled with chili sauce after being cut by a knife. He was cut by countless knives, and life was more than death. Li Macho was also forced to step back by the strong energy, with blood seeping out from the corner of her mouth. Her right hand couldn't stop trembling, and Fuchen didn't know where she had thrown it. She glanced at Wu Gong, who was lying on the brink of death by the wall. Her eyes instantly turned blood red, and her voice seemed to come from the ice and snow. With a wave of her hand, the tiger roared and the dragon sang. I didn't expect that the famous Jing, the great hero Gua, was also attacking the shameless generation. Wu Gong finally saw the man who walked in. The man has thick eyebrows and big eyes, a broad chest and a straight waist. He is in his 30s, with a slight mustache on his upper lip and a face full of righteousness. At this moment, he was looking at Wu Gong, who was lying in the corner with some guilt. Gua Jing's heart was complex, and Xie was now on the brink of death. He was so angry that his head went dizzy. Seeing his enemy in the room, he couldn't help but slap him. Unexpectedly, he accidentally injured Wu Gong sitting at the table. However, the injury of the master is important at the moment. Hand over the antidote, I'll let you go, otherwise, no wonder Gua is ruthless and ruthless. Ha ha ha, Gua Daxia is so famous in the martial arts world that I want to ask for some advice. Before Li Macho could finish speaking, she suddenly shook her palm towards the window behind her, and countless silver needles flew out of her palm, dazzling her eyes like a celestial maiden scattering flowers. But he still took a slow step. A beautiful shadow broke the window before the silver needle came, just like an oriole turning over to escape the icy silver needle like a pear flower in the rainstorm. He also held a silver needle in his hand, pulled up Wu Palace on the ground, and tried not to get into his arm. Bold. Li Macho was about to go mad with anger and waved his palm like a ghost, slapping the woman's head. But the sound of the broken air behind her forced her to give up this move, and she could only dodge in embarrassment and escape to another corner of the room, next to Lu Wushuang. Looking at the two people, one on the left and the other on the right, surrounding themselves in the middle. Glancing again, Wu Gong was held in her hand by the woman. Li Macho gritted his teeth and said, Gua Daxia is here, so this one is Huang Rong, the leader of the Huang gang. The two couples have a deep affection for each other, and their dignified reputation has spread throughout the martial arts world. Unexpectedly, upon seeing each other today, they were all such despicable people. This really opened Li's eyes. Huang Rong sneered and shook Wu Gong's hand, saying, Ha, I have long heard that Red Practice Fairy Li Macho has excellent martial arts skills and is extremely cunning, comparable to people in the demon realm. Although my husband and wife are not righteous, they have never been lenient towards people in the demon realm. Now that you have also received the Ice Soul Silver Needle, you should quickly hand over the antidote. My husband said, as long as you hand over the antidote, I will let you leave. My husband has every word, even if he is a demon in the demon realm, he will not deceive you. Li Macho gritted his teeth, took out a jade bottle from his arms and threw it to Huang Rong. At the same time, he grabbed up and was tied to Lu Wushuang like Zongzi. The antidote is for you. Give me back. Taking the jade bottle calmly, Huang Rong picked out the cork with her thumb like a sheep fat white jade and sniffed it in front of her nose. The elegant floral fragrance emanates from it, which is extremely light and cannot be smelled without careful observation. With a gurgling turn of her eyes, Huang Rong remained silent and aimed the bottle at Wu Gong's mouth, which was already slightly blurry in consciousness. She poured half a bottle in one breath. She secretly scrutinized Li Macho's expression, and when she saw her icy face, there was no change in expression, only a hint of relief in her pupils. She immediately understood that the antidote was really in her hand. Wu Gong greedily turned his tongue and swallowed royal jelly into his stomach. This thing is a great tonic for ordinary people, and it is also a treasure that can enhance internal strength for martial artists. It is also the antidote for the Ice Soul Silver Needle. However, Wu Gong's body is only in his teens and has been constantly injured in recent days. Especially when I was so close up just now, I was hit hard by Jing's internal strength. My internal organs were damaged and I was already on the brink of death. This royal jelly can help him detoxify, provide energy, and restore his body. But the efficacy of royal jelly is also very domineering. Don't be fooled by Li Macho drinking just one bottle at a time. Her internal strength is incredibly deep, and she is naturally not afraid of the overwhelming impact of royal jelly's medicinal power. But at this moment, the domineering royal jelly has become a deadly poison for Wu Gong. His eyes suddenly popped, and blood spurted out from Wu Gong's mouth and nose. Even the corners of his eyes and earlobes began to drip blood downwards, and in an instant, Wu Gong became a bloody person. Huang Rong was startled, but as someone proficient in medical theory, she immediately understood that she had fed too much royal jelly. Jing, who was far away, didn't quite understand. He just thought that Li Macho was ruthless and even poisoned his own people. Suddenly, his heart lit up and he waved his palm to rush towards Li Macho, who wanted to save Wu Gong, and his heart beat against him. Tiger roar and dragon chant echoed in the room once again, and Li Macho's hair stood on end. He was forced to turn around and hastily slapped again. Even though her reaction speed was incredibly fast, how could she manage her internal power in such a hurry? She was immediately hit and her 7 orifices were bleeding uncontrollably, flying out. Huang Rong spat out her tongue, and years of marriage had shown her that Jing had misunderstood Li Macho. But facing such a witch, she didn't have any intention of explaining. Just flipping through Wu Palace, he began to inject internal energy into his body, helping him alleviate the impact of royal jelly on his body. With the injection of internal energy, even though Wu Gong's eyes were spinning, he finally saw Li Macho spitting blood, but could not say anything. I felt a sudden panic in front of me, my head tilted, and I lost all consciousness. Perhaps becoming a Cao thief is not a bad thing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, what are you doing to save him? Huang Rong's face showed a sense of helplessness. She knew it was because Jing's benevolent heart had once again erupted, so she quickly stopped and said, she has a lot of connections with the demonic witch Li Macho, maybe she is also a member of the demonic realm. The people in the demon realm have done many evil deeds. Let's leave them here to fend for themselves. He appears to be only 11 or 12 years old at most, with weak meridians, making it exceptionally difficult to practice martial arts. It should just be a close friend of Li Macho, perhaps the child of a witch's relative. It seems that he is about the same age as Fu Er. Such a child has no sense of right or wrong. He was hurt by my palm strength and then stabbed by you with an ice soul silver needle. I can't bear to leave him here to fend for himself. It's not too late to take him back to the island with you. After the injury is cured, we can make proper arrangements. Huang Rong rolled his eyes, but when he saw her husband's serious face, he could only nod and say, "Okay, but there's no need to bring him back to the island. There's a friend I know at the Jinling branch. When we pass by Jinling, we'll take him to the Jinling branch." Jing breathed a sigh of relief as his wife agreed and stood up, saying, "Okay, I'll go see the master in Guier. I'll go rent a boat tomorrow." Huang Rong looked at Jing's departure and couldn't help but show a strange expression, supporting her forehead. "This time I came out, it's just that my dad didn't find it. Instead, he found a bunch of children to go back to." "Sigh, what's going on?" Jing and Huang Rong came out of Peach Blossom Island not only to relax, but also to find their father-in-law, Huang Yaoshi. Now, Huang Yaoshi has not found it, but instead brought back a bunch of children. Just think of it, find some playmates for Fuer. Huang Rong couldn't resist Jing, so she could only comfort herself like this. Wu Gong is lying on a bed not far away. He actually woke up a long time ago, he just kept eavesdropping. Of course, it cannot be said that he is eavesdropping. He is now tightly bandaged all over his body, making it very difficult for him to move. "My eyelids are heavy, and I feel like a stone is pressing on my head, so I can only move my ears to listen." He also heard a lot of useful things. For example, Wu Sanyang was seriously injured and dying, and was taken away by Wu Santong. But although Wu Sanyang was taken away, his two sons were not taken away and were temporarily entrusted to Jing and Huang Rong. The reason is that it is not very convenient to rush on the road, so I asked Huang Rong and Jing to take care of me for a period of time. After Wu Sanyang settled down, Wu Santong personally went to Peach Blossom Island to pick him up. Yi Ernyang was also seriously injured, but she was from the Yi family in Hebei. Huang Rong sent the beggar's sect to find the Yi family's shop in Jiaxing, Hebei, and also sent her away. Kuzhenxie, an old man from his hometown, survived. Although the poison on his body was relieved by royal jelly, his internal injuries were not easily recovered. Jing has been using his internal strength to help him recover these past 2 days. But after all, he is old and his recovery is incredibly slow. Therefore, Jing and Huang Rong discussed and decided to return to Peach Blossom Island first. After Kuzhenhe's injury was healed, it was not too late to go find Huang Yaoshi. In addition, although Jing did not find his father-in-law this time, he found his brother-in-law's son. Yangguo. Wu Gong's tongue twitched as he listened. Wu Sanyang did not die, but the Wu brothers still entrusted Huang Rong and Jing. Kuzhenxie was not only seriously injured, but also hit by the poison of Ice Soul's silver needle, which can kill the throat, but he still did not die. Yangguo was also adopted by Jing and is preparing to take him back to Peach Blossom Island for proper recuperation in a daze. A white light curtain suddenly appeared in front of Wu Gong. When will love and revenge be avenged? The entanglement of the bright moon has been completed, and the mother and daughter of the Yi family have been successfully rescued, obtaining a designated refresh quota of X1. Specify the refresh quota, which can be used to refresh the refreshed gold fingers, reset the gold finger time, and reset the permanent retention gold finger task. Wu Gong looked at the light curtain that appeared on his pupils. Originally, the task could only be considered completed after learning about the fate of the Yi family and their daughter. However, this designated refresh quota seems to be of little use to oneself at the moment. After all, I only have one Eye of Bliss now, and there is still a deadline of over 20 days. Wu Gong suddenly smelled a faint fragrance, followed by his gaze, constantly burning his skin. He understood that someone was watching him, and Wu Gong quickly cleared his mind and prepared to pretend to sleep. But that gaze was not prepared to spare him. "Since I'm awake, why bother pretending to sleep?" This voice is none other than Huang Rong. Wu Gong shook his eyelids and opened his eyes, pretending to be very confused. After Li Macho's incident, he suddenly had no objection to the golden finger of the Eye of Bliss, and instead began to feel that it was useful. Although he said he didn't want to be a thief, when he really kissed him, Wugong couldn't forget that feeling for a long time. This is a pleasure he has never experienced in his previous life. This also activated some of his inner desires. Perhaps I should enjoy this golden finger. Cao Thief, let's just be Cao Thief. Anyway, we've all come back to life. What about being a prime minister? So, facing Huang Rong's pretty face that was close at hand, Wugong no longer dodged, but looked straight up. Jing's internal strength has just reached yang and is not suitable for helping people recover and heal. Huang Rong cultivates the first chapter of the 9 manual, which is called tendon changing in bone forging. His internal power is relatively gentle, and it is very suitable to help people heal. Therefore, she was responsible for helping Wugong with his injuries these 2 days. When a person wakes up and falls asleep, their heart rate is different. Huang Rong had a conversation with Jing before, but their attention was not focused here, so they did not notice that Wugong had already awakened. But once it quiets down, she immediately realized that Wugong had already awakened. I can't help but feel a bit awkward. After all, she just spoke ill of Wugong. However, Wugong appears to be just a teenager. In her opinion, it's very easy to fool. Moreover, Huang Rong was also very curious about the relationship between Wugong and Li Macho, and more importantly, she was particularly interested in the royal jelly. After her research, it should be some kind of honey, but she had never been exposed to this type of honey before. I am even more amazed that this honey can detoxify hundreds of toxins, not only the poison of Ice Soul's silver needle, but also some secret poisons from Peach Blossom Island. Huang Rong wanted to get clues from Wugong. I didn't expect it. When she saw those eyes and the words on her lips, she suddenly didn't know how to say them. Huang Rong was dressed in a light purple silk shirt. Although she looked like a beautiful woman, mature and steady in her attire, her every move exuded a sense of elegance. However, in the blink of an eye, she possessed the agility and cunning that only girls possess. Her hair was tied in a golden ring, and her beautiful black hair hung on her shoulders like a black waterfall. Her right wrist was adorned with a phoenix bracelet, and the phoenix on it was lifelike. 2 red gemstones adorned the phoenix's eyes, and when she stared at these 2 gemstones, her ears could vaguely hear the phoenix's howling sound. Crimson crawled all over Huang Rong's cheeks, and Wugong immediately understood that the Eye of Bliss was working. The latter's breathing began to become increasingly heavy, and a faint fishy smell began to spread in the air. Mother! A girl's exclamation interrupted the 2 people who were looking at each other. Huang Rong seemed to suddenly wake up, like a spring, standing up from the ground. Mother, you are indeed here. Guo Fu ran in and hugged Huang Rong. Mother, those 2 crying guys are crying again. You go and take a look, it's really noisy. Huang Rong blushed and nodded, okay, I'll go in a moment. She gently pushed Guo Fu aside and ran out of the room, but didn't go to see the Wu brothers. Instead, she ran towards her own room in the opposite direction. Guo Fu looked at her figure with some confusion and sensitively sensed that something was wrong with her mother. But after all, she was not deeply involved in the world, so she didn't think too much. Instead, she noticed Wugong lying on the bed. However, Wugong has now closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. Guo Fu called him a few times but didn't receive any feedback. He suddenly felt a bit bored and turned around to leave the room. Huang Rong sat on the bed, her heart racing for a moment. However, after calming down for a moment while practicing the technique, Huang Rong realized something was wrong again. The mental techniques she and Jing practice are both renowned martial arts masters. Although Jing often indulges in practicing martial arts and cannot extricate himself, their sexual activities are very regular. If it weren't for Huang Rong not wanting to experience the pain of being pregnant in October again, these more than 10 years would have been filled with children. Am I poisoned? Huang Rong shook her head decisively, pestering Huang Yaoshe from a young age to give her full confidence in pharmacology. zhaoshuyuan.com. She is definitely not poisoned. Huang Rong began to carefully recall everything that had just happened. She remembered the eyes she had seen, and just as she had doubts in her heart, many shameful images flashed through her mind. Her cheeks turned crimson again, and at that moment, Jing walked in from outside with a tired face. He just helped Kuzhinxia clear his meridians. After all, Kuzhinxia is old, and fortunately he has been practicing martial arts for many years. Otherwise, the injuries on that body would not survive on an ordinary person. As soon as Huang Rong saw her husband come in, she immediately felt a bright light in her eyes, and her whole body's heat finally found the outlet for venting. Jing's internal energy consumption was excessive, and he didn't have a good mood. However, looking at his wife's eager big eyes, he could only helplessly pull up the gauze curtain around the bed. Wugong struggled to sit up from the bed, but due to his excessive movements, he pulled on the wound and grinned in pain. He sat by the bed, looking out at the moon. I couldn't help feeling a bit confused for a moment. But soon, he became determined. What happened in the past 2 days made him feel deeply powerless, especially during the confrontation between Jing and Li Macho. He was just affected and almost killed alive. I want to become stronger, at least not so easily die, and then marry a dozen or so wives. Anyway, there's no bigamy here, right? In Wugong's mind, he thought of all the women he had met in the past few days. Yi Ernyang, Wu Sanyang, Li Macho, Huang Rong. They are each as beautiful as immortals, they are the only beings they can look up to in their previous lives. Perhaps I can give it a try. Is Chapter 10 invalid? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, crunch. The Jiangnan region is often cloudy and rainy, but it doesn't snow often, and there won't be a few days and nights of thunderstorms like in the north. Therefore, there is no fear of snow accumulation on the roof, and the roof is also built high and steep. But in order to prevent water accumulation on rainy days, thin tiles are used on the roof for drainage. This not only tightly arranges the tiles, but also has a good drainage effect and will not accumulate water. But there is also a downside to this. That's because the tiles of the house are relatively light, they fall off at a touch, shatter on the ground, and the sound is loud and crisp. If someone walks on tiles, even with light steps, they will still be heard. Huang Rong looked at her sleeping husband and let out a long sigh. After being warmed up, her heart remained hot as she dressed and looked at the moon outside the window. Suddenly, Huang Rong raised her eyebrows and her belt, wrapped in internal energy, tied her clothes around her body. The long sword was wielded, and before the scabbard landed, the figure seemed like a ghost, already climbing onto the roof. Wugong also heard footsteps on the roof. However, what he heard was not very appropriate, he could only vaguely hear the faint footsteps. But as Huang Rong climbed onto the roof, the sound of footsteps became very noticeable. Wugong frowned as he vaguely heard the voices of conversation above. But no matter how he shook his ears, he could still only hear vaguely. Above the roof. Huang Rong looked coldly at the man standing on the edge of the eaves. Jing has also awakened. At this moment, standing beside her with a pale face. The couple exchanged a glance at each other. Obviously, they were all shocked by the strength displayed by the person in front of them. Especially with each move of the opponent, they surprisingly used the beggar's sex unique technique of dragon subduing 18 palms and a falling hero divine sword palm created by Huang Rong's father, Wang Yaoshi. However, although the other party imitates very well, they do not grasp some key points very well, giving a feeling of imitating the cat and drawing the tiger, and following the example of the gourd. In addition, they are now in Jiaxing, Jiangnan, and immediately think of the famous Morong family in Jiangnan. As time passes and the stars move, what is the significance of visiting the Morong family late at night? Who said my surname is Morong? The man standing by the eaves slowly turned his face and revealed a face hidden under a black mask. I have heard for a long time that Guodashia, Huang Vexia, has excellent martial arts skills and is renowned in the martial arts world. Her deep love for her husband and wife sets an example for martial artists in the world. Upon seeing it today, it was truly extraordinary and I admire it. However, in the daytime, Your Excellency and his wife's tendency to deceive others is truly a loss of their heroic qualities. How do you say this? Huang Rong finished speaking and exchanged a glance with Jing. Both of them already have a clear idea, which may be related to Li Macho. Don't misunderstand, I have nothing to do with that red practice which. It's just a matter of meddling and saying a few words when I see injustice on the road. Recently, there has been a lot of trouble in the Jiangnan region. If you have nothing to do, it's better not to stay here any longer. Let's leave soon, it's good for everyone. After speaking, the person flew towards the pitch-black night. Jing was still chasing after him, but Huang Rong grabbed his arm and said, "Be careful, don't fall into the trap of luring the tiger away from the mountain." Returning to the room, Kujinxia had already sat in it. Jing quickly walked over and said, "Master, why are you up? I heard the commotion upstairs, get up and see what the Murong family is all about. It should be true. My dad once said that this Dozhuan star shift can indeed imitate the martial arts moves of the world, but its essence is still a skill of borrowing strength. No matter what kind of martial arts the opponent uses, they can transfer their strength and counterattack the opponent themselves. Jinga and I used the dragon subduing 18 palm and the falling eagle divine sword palm. Therefore, the other party only used the 18 dragon subduing palms and the falling eagle divine sword palms. Huang Rong said thoughtfully, while tightly wrapping her clothes around her body. Just now, she heard footsteps and just had a chance to cover herself with a coat and fasten her belt before flying up to the roof, but inside, she didn't wear any clothes. Although the clothes on my body were particularly spacious enough to cover my body, there was still some strangeness, and I couldn't help but wrap my clothes tightly. "Master, I'll take you back to rest first." Jing sent Kujinxia back to his room and found Huang Rong writing and drawing in front of the table. Walking over, I hugged her from behind and saw her painting the masked man waking up from sleep. I couldn't help but smile and say, "Why, is the Huang gang mainly seeking revenge?" Of course, if you don't seek revenge, it's not a gentleman. Although I'm not a gentleman, I still want to seek revenge. Huang Rong's painting skills were cultivated by Huang Yaoshe with his own hands, and his painting skills were extremely exquisite. With just a few gentle strokes of the pen, the full face of the masked man appeared on the drawing paper. Although it is still very blurry, the approximate body shape can already be distinguished. There are patrol elders in the beggars sect who are specifically responsible for reconnaissance and are experts in tracking enemies. The beggars sect disciples are everywhere, even if there is only a blurry portrait, there is a high probability that it can be found. Called the disciples of the nearby beggars sect and handed him the portrait, but Huang Rong didn't rush to ask him to leave. Instead, she asked what had happened recently. The available news is that nothing major has happened. Recently, the Jiangnan region has been peaceful, and of course, something may have really happened. It's just that ordinary disciples don't have the authority to know. Huang Rong nodded and returned to the inn. She keenly sensed that something might have happened. After going back and telling Jing about this matter, the latter was also very serious. "Master Hong gave you the beggars sect. You should have a dim sum. The affairs in Jiangnan have always been handled by Ma Deyuan and Deputy Leader Ma." Huang Rong remained silent for a moment and said, "He should be in Wuxi. Just ask him and he'll know what exactly happened." "Okay, let's rent a boat from here to Wuxi and then go out to sea on the way." Huang Rong nodded and saw that Jing's face was tired. She said with a hint of heartache, "You go rest first. I'm here, you can rest assured." Jing didn't hesitate and turned back to his room to rest. Huang Rong walked around several rooms, only to stop at the door of Wu Gong's room. She was a bit unsure whether to go in or not. Originally, she was not very worried about this young man who had an unclear relationship with the red practice witch in her heart. In fact, even if the red practice witch suddenly came to take him away, she would not stop him further. I don't know why, but as soon as she arrived at the door of the room, she couldn't walk anymore. It seems that if you don't take a glance inside, you might feel uneasy all night. I hesitated for a moment. She still pushed the door open and walked in. Wu Gong is sitting by the bed. Upon hearing someone push the door in, I instinctively wanted to put the bucket back to sleep. But Huang Rong's speed is really too fast. In addition, Wu Gong is currently injured all over his body and his movements are not very agile. Therefore, he simply stopped struggling. Sitting on the bed like this, staring at Huang Rong. Huang Rong saw that Wu Gong was safe and sound, and turned to prepare to leave. You can look at those eyes in person. She had no choice but to make decisions. Pushed open the door and closed it. Wu Gong watched Huang Rong walk up to him from above. I don't know if it's an illusion. Wu Gong always felt that as she walked towards her, she could see some things that were clearly not clothes as her clothes swayed and undulated. Huang Rong gently bit her lips, suppressing the strange feeling on her body, and sat by the bed. Give me your hand, she said. Wu Gong raised his hand, and Huang Rong held on to his pulse. Soft internal energy quickly surged in. She carefully examined Wu Gong's physical condition and gently frowned. The injury was developing in a positive direction, but no matter how many times she explored, Wu Gong's meridians were finer than she had imagined, and she could easily sense that there seemed to be a faint foreign object rippling in his meridians. Years of experience have taught her that there is a deep-seated toxin in Wu Gong's body, which is slowly eroding his body. At present, she is at a loss for this toxin. Where are you from? Wu Gong shook his head and said, I don't remember. When I woke up, I was in Lujiazwang. It was the people of Lujiazwang who saved me. Wu Gong had no intention of concealing anything, so he quickly told Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com everything he had experienced. Huang Rong listened to everything, but only she knew how much she had truly heard. Wu Gong also noticed that her heart was filled with sweat. Seeing her sitting silently with her head down, Huang Rong's heart moved and she touched her arm with her hand. As if she had suddenly woken up, she suddenly withdrew her palm and said with a hint of guilt, So how did you get involved with the red practice witch? I just said some things to say. She's just a pitiful woman deceived by a heartless man. Wu Gong changed to a more comfortable position and slowly approached Huang Rong. She actually never walked out, that's why she became fierce, cruel, and ruthless. In his early years, he met Master Eden, an old monk who had practiced Buddhism but was still an incompetent person. He made Li Macho endure, hoping to dissolve the hatred in 10 years. But time will never diminish hatred, it will only give birth to this powerful female demon head in the martial arts world, so if we have to take responsibility, this one lamp master is the culprit. Are you saying I'm right? Wu Gong secretly placed his hand on Huang Rong's waist and was about to hold it up. Yes. Huang Rong felt as if she had sensed something and suddenly stood up, her cheeks turning red. It's getting late. We still have to hurry tomorrow. You should rest early. After speaking, she left without looking back. Wu Gong scratched his head and thought to himself, is it because the Eye of Bliss has failed? Who would have thought that when her palm touched the bedsheet, she realized that the place where Huang Rong had just sat was completely. A playful smile was drawn at the corner of his mouth, and Wu Gong continued to look at the moon outside the window.